Isaiah chapter 58 and verse 1. Cry aloud, spare not, lift up thy voice like a trumpet, and show my people their transgressions, and the house of Jacob their sins.
Copyright disclaimer. This content does not belong to Bible Chronicles or claim this intellectual property. The content provided today has and always will belong to the content owner. Bible Chronicles does not have any affiliation with the owner of this property. As mentioned, Bible Chronicles did not intend to make use of any material for the purpose of harvesting gain. However, Title 17 of United States copyright law states material and use can only be done when it's for theological or general educational purposes, and thus Bible Chronicles believes that this principal material falls under fair use, which honors protection under Section 107 of the same U.S. copyright law.
Quiero pensar, pero no puedo, no. El ruido en la ciudad está consumiendo, wow. Quieren pensar, sin ni siquiera estar al mando. Tanta publicidad subliminal te está matando. Les cuesta decidir por sí mismos cuál es su mando. Publican sonrisas con el corazón llorando. Quieren brillar, pero sin tener que valerse de tener sus ideas propias. Los veo a todos igual, solo son la réplica de la imitación de una triste copia. Obedece, la vida es un suspiro y envejeces. Te dejas distraer por estupideces y pierdes el eje. Te duele por dentro, entonces te creces, pero aceptas mucho menos de lo que mereces. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que le di, sobre cómo actuar? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar, y solo así podrás brillar. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que le di, sobre cómo actuar? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar, y solo así podrás brillar. Conserva tu juicio y tu intuición, más activos que el que lucha por lo suyo y no se rinde. Yo ya sé bien cuál es mi misión, y es contarte que el mal por su propio pie pronto se extingue. No caigas bajo su control, pues por la televisión es normal que mal lo pinten. Tú mantente firme en conexión con la fuente de creación, vivirás siempre de fin de. Dios abre los ojos, dime lo que ves. A tus propios hijos matándose por billetes. Niños por cada 2 por 3. Pa' unos es bendición, con otros por su causa pequen. Y yo que intento ser un ser crístico, voy bendiciendo hasta los diablos. Piensan que es cierto el mensaje típico. Dicen que invento lo del engaño, y mientras lucho contra mis errores, demonios escucho, me ofrecen soluciones. Pero sé que hay un ángel que quiere que mejore. Me dice haz un trabajo interno antes de que lo ignores, antes que otra vez llores y se llenen los mares de pena y de dolores, ya que en mi mente no caben. La paz no va en un sobre, somos algo importante. Nunca te revelaste y por eso no lo sabes. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que le di, sobre cómo actuar? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar, y solo así podrás brillar. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que le he dicho? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar. Solo si podrás brillar. Me desperté tan cansado, me sentía mal herido de todo lo que he pasado. No me quita lo aprendido, por dentro me he perdonado, pero casi no me olvido. Me desperté tan cansado, me sentía mal herido de todo lo que he pasado. No me quita lo aprendido, por dentro me he perdonado, pero casi no me olvido, no. Todos repiten lo que dice el referente. Discursos vacíos lejos de ser coherentes. De lo que no sabes será mejor que no inventes. Que investigues y no te dejes lavar la mente. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que decís, sobre cómo actuar? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar y solo así podrás brillar. ¿Y quién te ha dicho a ti que no puedes pensar sobre lo que decís, sobre cómo actuar? Lucha por ser feliz sin a nadie dañar y solo así podrás brillar. Quiero pensar, pero no puedo, no. El ruido en la ciudad está consumiendo,
El autor viene a decirnos con mucha firmeza y gran convencimiento lo mismo que nos decía en el siglo XVIII el barón de Holbach, ¿no? Un filósofo francés de origen alemán. Si nos remontamos al comienzo, entonces hallaremos que la ignorancia y el temor crearon a los dioses. La fantasía, el entusiasmo o el engaño los adornaron o desfiguraron. La debilidad les rinde culto, la credulidad los conserva, la costumbre los respeta y la tiranía los apoya para que la ceguera de los hombres sirva a sus propios intereses.
Testing 1, 2, 3. I think we got it. Yep, I think we got it. I think we got it. What up, fam? What up? Hope y'all doing well. I got something interesting to show you. Now, I wanted to play, again, this is on the same topic. We're still on the same topic, if you guys understand what I'm talking about. Now, I wanted to show a different video before because it's just adding to, like, it's given us, or at least I should say, I'm speaking for myself right now, it's giving me ammunition. But I like to show, because there's a lot involved in the stuff that I watch, and then I want to piece them together and put them together for y'all. And sometimes I take a lot of info. I'm not one to do these little 10, 15-minute videos and give you little choppy spots. I don't work that way, man. Because this investigation stuff is very interesting. It's very, at least for the most part, for me, at least I would like to say very thorough, right? And I'm only doing it to make a conscious decision in what I believe in and sharing with you guys what I have found. A lot of what this video is going to show and share is going to be stuff that I've been talking about. Now, for example, all right, I had, I believe it's this book, okay? I had read this book to you guys a few weeks ago. Before I get started, let me say what's up to the fam. Hey, how you doing, sis? Good to have you here. What up, all be revealed? How you doing? Worship the Holy Father, the Son commanded. How you doing? You may or may not like what I've been bringing out lately, man. But it's for mature audience. You know, you that are faint of heart or get emotional real quick, you're probably not a good place to be in. Anyways, that said, good to have you guys here. Anyhow, so I brought this book out, and in this book, it talks about Teutonic mythologies, right? Like where these things come from, paganism and all those sorts of things. So I don't know if it's this particular book in reality, honestly. I was just kind of doing it on the fly real quick because I remembered before I got the video going. But there's a book that I had brought out that was actually talking about the hold on, I think this is it. It was giving us a history of where I believe Freemasonry came from. Yeah, it's this one, right? So this is regarding Prince Hall Freemasonry here in the States. But this so-called black man who is a Freemason, which I believe now, I think all of us can really wrap our mind around the fucking idea that, hey, yo, that's not far-fetched. You know what I'm saying? So he gives a history of Freemasonry, and in this book, right, he goes into particular things like the history of Freemasonry when it showed up here in the Americas and all of this stuff. And one of the points here, let me see if I can just rather quickly do this. And in one of the topics that he brings up the Knights Templars, right? And I think this is the page it's on page 43. Symbolic degrees, Freemasonry under the Grand Lodge 1776 consisted of 3 symbolic degrees, including the Holy Royal Ark. Do you see the 3 symbolic degrees? That's why a lot of these faiths, Christianity, BHIism, paganism, Judaism, even in their Talmudic beliefs, believe in a Trinity concept. They believe, yes, you have to understand that. They study the Kabbalah, very well known. Freemasons do it as well. So they believe in a 3 concept, like 3-digit number 3, Father, Son, Holy Spirit type of deal. That's where you get this. Thanks for sending me that video, by the way, brother. And I kind of knew about this stuff already. This is why I mentioned it, yesterday regarding the video about the oil, the pineal gland, and how, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I might even talk about that later on this week or next week. Anyways, let me get off the topic. So here let me just kind of go back to this. Consisted of 3 symbolic degrees, including the Royal Ark. Grand Lodges conferred not only in the Royal Ark degree, but that of the Knight Templars, as well as detached ceremonials. So here we see that, he's talking about the Knights Templars. There's, I guess, 62. So here he mentions these guys, and I think it's the following page, let's see, where he talks about how these Knight Templars were taken care of. He mentions them in 1700. He talks a little bit about their history in 1200 as well. He mentions certain people. So I found it to be very, very helpful in our, I guess you could say, in our search, right? So you can see Templars is a common. It's pretty common here. I mean, 62 times this word is in this book. Okay. All right. So now, with that in consideration, I want to show this video. Hopefully, they don't block me, and that's why I'm testing it. If they give me a hard time, I'm just going to show the other video because I know that's not going to be a problem. But Lord willing, they don't stop us. Okay. So again, this is for education and edification purposes, family. I'm not trying to make you believe anything other than what your spirit has already told you within you to believe in. What I'm doing is providing enough information, resources, so you'll know exactly what it is that you believe in and if it's correct. Because stuff is really getting nuts here. I'm going to say this to you before I start this video. If you guys think that, like, what some of the scriptures talked about what was going to happen isn't here, it is already here. I'll give you an example. I remember there was a time where other countries' food or products were more expensive than here, okay? Like milk, eggs, all that stuff, products, whatever. Europe was usually about the average here as well, right? But everybody else was less. Like there was more buying power. For the first time, I've seen already 2 countries where you can literally spend $18 on your average grocery, right? Like spend $18 and buy the amount of groceries that you probably would need on a 2-day, 3-day sitting. That would cost you about $150 today. And I saw it for the first time, and it reminded me of the scripture in 2 Ezra that talked about that when visuals get so cheap, everybody's going to think, hey, we're all good. And that's when perils will begin. And guess what? 99-cent store is gone. Walmarts are gone. Now other countries, their food, when they go shopping, they're not paying $8 to $9 for eggs, fam. They're still doing it at $1.99. Look it up. Matter of fact, look up Germany. That'll give you an idea. When you go shopping in Germany, their stores, they got $1.99 egg, 12 egg, a dozen of eggs. We are there already. So you better be mindful where you're putting your spirit and thought and faith in. Because I told you, they gave us a lot of misinformation, and it's your job to discern what is right and what is not. All right, let's go. Hope you guys enjoy this.
Is the story of Adam and Eve more than just a myth? What if humanity was crafted by beings from another world? The Knights Templar, keepers of ancient secrets, holding knowledge that could unravel the true origins of man. Do we really understand how life began on this planet? What mysteries lie hidden in our past? As civilizations rise and fall, are we doomed to repeat history? Or is this just the beginning of something greater? Delve into the mysteries that could redefine everything we know about our past and our future. This is more than history. It's the key to rebuilding the world.
My name is Timothy Warren Hogan, and I'm the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. We have a story to tell about the history of the Templars and their incredible discoveries they discovered from the ancient world, going back to Atlantis. But in order to tell this story, we need to start somewhat in the middle, as it were. And our story really needs to begin in Scotland. Scotland connects not only...
Just say this, family, you're going to find out where this whole doctrine of Atlantis came from. And it came from this era, 1100, right, AD, with the Knights Templars doing some digging. And it's kind of funny that they find these documents supposedly in Jerusalem. What the fuck does that have to do with Atlantis? Or what does that have to do with America? And supposedly that the Knights Templars were trading with the natives. If you guys were already trading with the natives, why would they be all in awe by seeing you fuckers again? See what I mean, fam? So every cult, every faith is going to generate their own fucking history, man. Is what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, this is what I'm seeing. A repeat of just their own histories and giving us what they want us to believe.
To the Masonic traditions, which were intimately connected with Freemasonry, but to me personally, to my family line, to my family history. I had many family members in the past who were Templars and who were involved in Freemasonry, which was connected with Templarism. My great-grandfather was one of the fathers of the American Revolutionary War. I had another great-grandfather who was heavily influential in Freemasonry in Scotland. So in order to tell this story, I can think of no better place to go than to the Grand Lodge of Scotland. So come with me as I go to the Grand Lodge of Scotland so that we can look at the archives there and some of the materials that help to pinpoint this story in history.
Timothy, we're here at the Museum of the Grand Lodge of Scotland here in Edinburgh, and as you will appreciate, there are a lot of artefacts, ancient artefacts, which are truly exciting in this museum. But there is something very special, which is going to truly excite you. I know your family are related to Burns, the ancient family going back, but there is things in here that are really going to excite you, and I can't wait to show you. So, Timothy, what I want to do is introduce you to this painting. Now, this painting shows the inauguration of Robert Burns as Poet Laureate of Lodge Canongate Kilwinning. Lodge Canongate Kilwinning number 2 is the oldest lodge room in the world, still extant. This was painted by Brother William Stuart Watson, and it shows Burns being inaugurated on the 1st of March 1787. The painting itself was presented to the Grand Lodge of Scotland in 1862 by Brother James Burness. James Burness is a direct descendant of Robert Burns, Burness being the ancient family name of Burns before it was changed.
The beginning of the Knights Templar started in 1096 when two knights, one who was a Moor named Hugh de Paynes and another knight by the name of Godfrey de St. Omar, came together and shared their understanding from different backgrounds of the belief in an ancient civilization that was very advanced. At first, the understanding of this civilization had to do with the writings of Genesis, and in particular, the story of Noah and his flood. There was a belief that there had been a high civilization that existed prior to a great flood, but that there was remnants that had survived this great flood and had preserved aspects of this civilization, preserved the philosophy, the technologies, and wisdom from the ancient world. Godfrey de St. Omar and Hugh de Paynes set out to find out more about this. And this journey took them from France into Constantinople. There, in Constantinople, they went to a church known as the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus that was said to contain an order that existed known as the Brothers of the East. This group, known as the Brothers of the East, which had originally been founded in Greece in 1057, and then had moved to Constantinople and had settled in this building that had been designed by an alchemist. Here they set up plans to preserve knowledge, what they knew about this pre-civilization, and they initiated Hugh de Paynes and Godfrey de St. Omar into a tradition and gave them a mission to start what was to become known as the Order of the Temple, later to be known as the Poor Knights of Christ of the Temple of Solomon. Hugh de Paynes and Godfrey de St. Omar met with one of the greatest scholars of the day in Constantinople, a man by the name of Michael Psellos. He had been an author of numerous books, and another important figure by the name of Theoclete, who was also a member of the church at the time, gave them the mission to go to Jerusalem, to assemble a team together to go to Jerusalem and find certain artifacts. Hugh de Paynes and Godfrey de St. Omar went back to France. They met with 7 other knights, and they took these people back to Jerusalem. There in Jerusalem, they met with Pope Urban II, who granted them land next to what was believed to be the ruins of King Solomon's temple. Here they set up their activity, and they were given the stated mission to protect all pilgrims in the Holy Land. Well, there were 9 knights, and obviously 9 knights couldn't protect all the pilgrims in the Holy Land. This proved to be somewhat of a cover. For what they really were doing for the next 9 years was digging and doing archaeological work under the Temple Mount. As they dug more and more, they began to find artifacts that pointed to proof of this civilization. And they also found other items that proved to be embarrassing at best and maybe even considered heretical to the standard Roman Church dogma at the time. Reporting this back to the Pope, who was the only person they had to answer to, it was arranged that they just keep this quiet and they keep doing their digging and their excavations. Within time, they realized that the things they began to find under the Temple Mount proved that there was indeed this ancient civilization that was very advanced. And so they began to seek out other groups that knew more about it. At this point, they began to adopt the red equal-armed cross they had found being used all over the ancient world, in particular by what were known as the Anunnaki of the ancient Sumerian civilization. This equal-armed cross could be found on the outfits and the carvings of the Anunnaki from ancient tablets and reliefs from Sumeria. So the Templars then adopted this symbol as their main symbol and went out and began to seek and find other remnants of this civilization. Ultimately, it led them back into Egypt. They set up shop at the Temple of Isis at Philae, and at this point, they began to look for more evidence of this civilization. At this point, they needed to have a structure for the organization, and they needed to create what was known as a rule for how their membership would operate and what they could and couldn't do and how they would be organized. In order to do this, they again went to Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, who was, as mentioned, he was a leader within the Roman Church at the time. He was also a secretly practicing Druid, and he was good friends with Shlomo Yitzhaki, better known as Rashi of Troyes, France. Rashi was a very famous Kabbalist within the Jewish mystical tradition of studying Kabbalah. In order to draft this rule, he created a rule composed of 72 articles. Each of these articles was said to correspond to one of the 72 Kabbalistic names of God. With this order in place, they set to work to structure their organization to continue the work of research with their meeting of different groups around the Mediterranean and in Africa and even parts around Europe. One of the things they came to learn about was that some of these groups were preserving Greek and Roman texts, which were not known in Europe at the time, particularly the writings of Plato. And within these writings of Plato, they came to learn of the name of this ancient civilization, which was known as Atlantis. This Atlantis was said to be a very advanced civilization and was able to do things that they had only dreamed of being able to do, both technologically and spiritually. So they sought to find more evidence of this civilization. With this, they began to dig more in other places, including in Egypt, and studying the temples in Egypt and studying the temple walls, in particular the Edfu, what came to be known later as the Edfu building texts, which spoke of an advanced civilization that had had a cataclysm and then had passed on information to the Egyptians, and that the Egyptians had inherited some of the knowledge from this. Standard historians have said that the Templars were actually enemies, if you will, to Islam, but early on, the word, the old Norman French word for temple was Allah. And so they were known as the Order of Allah, or the Order of the Temple. And the Templars, through Hugh de Paynes, who became nominated as the first Grand Master of the Knights Templar through his Moorish family background, they were given fatwas, which was a rule from the Islamic tradition, giving them permission to occupy certain areas and to dig and even be given help in digging. One of the things that they came across near Jerusalem recounted as certain clay jars. And when they broke these jars open, they discovered new texts that were associated with the Bible and also with Kabbalistic theory, in particular, the foundations of a text known as the Zohar. Because the Templars couldn't translate all of these texts that were clearly written in Aramaic and Hebrew and languages that they weren't completely familiar with, they had to take them to trusted Jewish sources. One of these texts proved to be the foundation aspects of a text known as the Zohar. The Zohar had information in it that pointed to knowledge of the earth and navigation on the earth that the Templars weren't aware of before. After a short period of time, one of the things that the Templars began finding a series of boxes, which through their own understanding of the Old Testament, they knew these boxes fit the description of what came to be known as the Ark of the Covenant. These arks, and I say arks because they discovered multiple arks. The boxes were a form of electrical capacitor, and they would build up static electricity, and if you touched them, it would shock you to death. So they had to learn how to deal with this. And they had to also learn how to move these things out of the Holy Land into other locations to preserve them until they could figure out what they were. Amidst all of this was the challenge that the Roman Church at the time was wanting this knowledge to bring back to Europe so that they could use it for their own influence within Europe. And the Templars quickly realized that it would be irresponsible to turn some of this over to any one authority because it could be abused. So they needed to figure out what they were going to do with it. Therefore, they set up a series of vaults between Palestine into Lebanon, Portugal, and all the way up into Scotland to preserve some of this knowledge temporarily until they could find a place to deposit it. This is the beginning of the real mission of the Templar Order. Shortly thereafter, the Roman Church knew that the Templars were sitting on information and artifacts that could be a problem for the Roman Church, and so they were willing to give the Templars authority and give them permission to do things that they wouldn't allow most people to do. In time, the Templars began to move more artifacts and more knowledge from these groups and from the things they were finding in the Holy Land back into Europe. And they built up their organization. And they did this because most people, when they think of the Templars, they just think of knights on horseback defending people, but they actually became the first multinational corporation. They had farmers that had to grow food. They had sea captains, and they had to build ships to transport people from Europe into the Holy Land and elsewhere. They had scribes who began to translate and to copy texts that they were finding. They also had stonemasons. In fact, one of the earliest rules of the Templar Order specifically outlined that the only people that were allowed to wear gloves within the Templar Order were the priests Templars, whose job it was to serve communion to those who wanted it, and the stonemasons within the Templar Order. Within a short period of time of only 200 years, the Templars built over 1,000 Gothic structures around Europe and began to build what were later to become known as the Gothic cathedrals of France. These Gothic cathedrals were built to preserve some of the knowledge that they were carrying over and finding from their archaeological work, including what were to become the Gothic cathedrals of France, known as the cathedrals of Notre Dame and cathedrals of other places. But here, we need to go back to some of the Atlantean mysteries and secrets that they were preserving. They had already found these arks, which had tremendous power. They had also learned that within these arks was a substance that they assumed was manna, because that's what it was referred to in the Bible. But this powder, this white powder, had a very mysterious properties to it. They found it was able to heal things, heal the body incredibly fast. It stimulated consciousness, and they figured out that there were ways of producing it. By looking at the Egyptian walls, they began to piece together how to produce this substance. Between the Egyptian walls and the meeting with the different groups that were preserving aspects of this, they began to produce this. And this actually led to Templars living much longer than the average people at the time. They also, as in their digging, they began to find maps, ancient maps that were alluded to territories across the ocean that had never been explored. And they discovered later to be recognized as the magnetic compass. So the Templars were actually the first to use a magnetic compass, and these were presumed to be remnants of this. This ancient civilization. So as the Templars went down into the Holy Land,
Hey, family, sorry, my bad. I realized I couldn't turn it on. Okay, so check this out. I have... No, we're good. The video didn't stop. So I have something to show you. It was just, I made a mistake, man, my bad. My bad. Anyhow, check this out. So he's talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this is from The Hope of Israel, Presumptive Evidence by Barbara Simmons in 1830-something. Okay, page 29, part of the introductory page. I'm just going to read this part here because they mentioned something to that effect. It says here, I'll go here, let's say, the high priest, when addressing the people, using what he terms the ancient divine speech, calling his hearers the beloved peculiar people. He's talking about our gente here, right? This is our gente here. You understand what I'm talking about? Our gente here. Calling his hearers the beloved peculiar people. Suppose they had a tradition that they had prophets, one who could perform miracles and foretell future events. Suppose they had an Ark of the Covenant imitated. See? Now, it also says, which is not permitted to touch the ground, and which no one may presume to touch or look into upon pain of death, except the officiating priest, that all their males must appear annually, that they are acquainted with the history of the jewelage, the building of the Babel, the predicting baptism of the earth by fire, destruction basically, and the longevity of the ancients who lived till their feet were worn out with walking and their throats with swallowing. I guess you could say that. See? So that right there can tell you that this Ark of the Covenant concept, look, when you look at Plato or even Diodorus Siculus' writings regarding this other land, Diodorus Siculus confirms and admits that there were people in these other lands, okay? The people that found this out, the Carthaginians, did not invade this land. They never went to that land, right? So keep that in mind. So, however, they don't get into the fact of who the fuck were those people in the first place. They didn't say like it was Atlantis-like. Matter of fact, they didn't say that. And I've read that to you guys many times regarding Diodorus Siculus and his link, okay? So he writes about that supposedly there's this other land, but that there's people living there, that if you consider reading any book in 1492 and on, when they talk about Spaniards coming here, supposedly, right, only by themselves, that they saw this beautiful land with people and, you know, buildings and all that shit. It traversed the waters, the sweet waters in, all that stuff. You know, they even said construction homes with gardens. Theodorus Achilles actually said that. All right. But everybody else that talks about quote unquote Atlantis and uses him as a reference always fucking forgets, right? That, you know, that there were people there. So with that in mind, let's continue with the video. Now, I just wanted to read this to you guys.
One of the things that they were charged with looking for was texts related to esoteric information describing other aspects of Genesis from the Torah. They started finding these artifacts, but they also began to find scrolls. In fact, one of the things they discovered, which was fundamental to their understanding of the Bible, was a text known as the Zohar. The Templars, rather than handing this discovery over to the Vatican, instead gave it to Jewish communities in Spain who they knew would be able to not only transcribe it, but take care of it. The same publishing company who published the Zohar for the first time in Toledo also became the same publishing company that published the book Parzival for the first time. This is significant because Parzival is a book which was the first Grail story that was published in the 1200s, specifically said that it was the Templars who were the guardians of the Holy Grail. This has led many to believe that there must be some sort of a relationship between these Grail romances and the Zohar itself, both of which were published by the same people in Toledo in the early 1200s. The Zohar describes a blueprint for how creation is formed, consisting of 10 emanations or aspects of God's consciousness connected by 22 pathways, each corresponding to one of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, with a hidden 11th or 33rd, while forming 32 combinations in all, with a hidden 33rd sphere. The entirety of this diagram, which has come to be known as the Tree of Life, has also been known as the face of God. It's another name for the layout of this tree. Or in Hebrew, the word partsuf means face. And the article of El, or Al, is the article for God. So the partsuf El, or the face of God, becomes Parzival within the Grail romances. And in this story, Parzival, it says that the Templars are the guardian of the Grail. The Zohar mentions that there are 7 continents and one of them is not populated, and that the earth is round, and that the earth goes around the sun. In a section called Vayikra, the Zohar describes how as the earth rolls as a ball, so that while some are on top, others are down. And while for some the sun shines, others are in dark. And there's a place where there's daylight all the time, except for a little time of darkness. So this text, which at first just seemed to be another aspect of the Bible, potentially another aspect of Torah, now was proving to be of value in understanding how the earth itself worked. The Templars were able to put all this together and start to set sail for the New World. It was to become the New World of the Americas, centuries before Columbus. The Templars began to establish trade with natives of the New World of the Americas. They began to take knowledge, their secret knowledge of the New World, back to Europe and make plans to eventually set something up there if they needed to. Meanwhile, they kept digging and they kept trying to understand these Kabbalistic texts more. They felt that this had been an incredible gift, an incredible revelation that had been given to them by God, and that they had incredible responsibility with it. They also understood that the Church of Rome at the time did not have the capacity to appreciate what was being found in the Holy Land, and that they had their own dogma that they were trying to sit on, and that to reveal some of this, to try to reveal some of this stuff to the public would have almost certainly meant that it would have just disappeared. There's no way that the Church of Rome would have allowed it. So they had to find ways to protect it. They had to preserve this knowledge. One of the things that the Templars then started to do is they started looking at how do we apply this knowledge to our building that we're doing. They took the ideas of the Kabbalistic tree of life and they started incorporating it into their architecture. In fact, one of the symbols that the Templar order became known for using right about the same time was the cross with 3 arms on it. This new cross, sometimes associated with later with the cross of Lorraine, actually had its origins within the Kabbalistic tree of life. It represented the middle pillar with the 3 horizontal steps or 3 horizontal paths going up it. Traditionally, these horizontal paths corresponded to the Hebrew letters Mem, Aleph, and Shin, also known as the mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Mem was associated with water, air was associated with Aleph, and Shin was associated with fire. So these 3 provided a blueprint that could be found not only in the human body, with the liquid functions at the level of the abdomen, the air at the area of the lungs, and fire or heat emanating from the head, but they applied these things to the layout of King Solomon's temple itself. They reasoned that there was a relationship of as above, so below, as outlined within the Zohar, and that the human body was just a microcosm of the temple, and that the temple became a macrocosm of the human body. And so the Templars, taking this model, began to apply it towards other things like the very cathedrals that they started to build across Europe. So even to this day, as you go into a cathedral, the baptismal font is at the area of the belly button or the abdomen. The choir is at the area of the lungs or the chest. And the sanctuary is at where all the candles are lit, is at the area of the head. And these cathedrals of Notre Dame, Our Lady, represent the Virgin Mary. And so as you leave the cathedral, you go through the arch or the birth canal. And so you become born as the Christ. Well, this was a very heretical concept at the time, but it's something that still exists and is found to this day. And it's found within this association that we find within the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah and within the Hebrew alphabet. The original 9 Templars had all come from what were known as Albigensian Gnostic families, with the exception of Hugh de Paynes, the first Grand Master of the Templars, who had come from a Moorish background. Well, all of these groups had already been interpreting the Bible in different ways than Roman Catholic dogma at the time. So they were prone to starting to look at things symbolically. However, with the discovery of the Zohar, this even gave further justification to look at the Bible in these new symbolic ways, or in their opinion, these old symbolic ways, because they believed that this was the original way to look at the Bible prior to the new Roman Catholic dogma getting involved in it. They started to gain a very different perspective of sacred texts. One of the groups that they had met with in the area of Iran and Iraq, modern day Iran and Iraq, was a group known as the Mandeans. The Mandeans were a Gnostic sect who believed that were later to become known as John Christians, because while they were Christians, they put a special emphasis on John the Baptist in the Bible. In fact, they believed that John the Baptist had a role even more significant than Jesus, and that the only reason why Jesus even became a significant thing in the New Testament is because John the Baptist died early. But if John the Baptist hadn't have died early, he would have been the great savior. He would have been the great teacher of mankind. In fact, some Mandeans have even gone so far as to believe that John the Baptist was Jesus, and that Jesus was just an esoteric name that John the Baptist adopted. Well, when the Templars encountered this, it was a whole new idea, even though they themselves had come from a Gnostic background. So here we need to explain what Gnosticism is. Gnosticism comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means direct, personal, divine revelations. It was a spirituality that did not require the intervention of a priest in order to get to heaven. In fact, even though there were Gnostic communities that had priests, the priest's job was more to fulfill ritual functions. But it was not believed that these rituals actually were like magical practices that gave you access to heaven. Rather, they had symbolic attributes. And in understanding these symbolic attributes, you came to understand yourself better. And it was through your own knowledge of yourself and your place in the universe and your connection to God that is what got you into heaven. And that heaven was a state of consciousness that could be experienced here and now rather than in the hereafter. Very different interpretation. The Gnostics also believed that the death and resurrection of Jesus was a metaphor. They believed that we all have to symbolically die to our attachment to this world, and that we have to symbolically awaken to a greater consciousness, which was known as a gnosis, or divine direct revelation of God, which could be found within ourselves and all around us. In fact, it was believed that our whole purpose of being here in this life was to learn and to wake up to this possibility. And so they interpreted Jesus's crucifixion, symbolic death, and awakening as the symbolic dying of his lower self so he could awaken to a new light of revelation, a new light of gnosis. Sophia was the goddess of wisdom. And in fact, it's believed that even the schools of Pythagoras were celebrating this goddess of wisdom. And in fact, the very word philosophy itself, which was coined by Pythagoras, comes from philo, meaning love, to love or lover, and Sophia, meaning wisdom. So philo, Sophia, lover of wisdom, is where philosophy comes from. And this goddess, Sophia, represented this. The story of Sophia was that she had incarnated into matter and had become totally lost in it. In fact, the stories say that she relished in matter for a long time, and she even copulated with everything in matter, just to come to understand it. And eventually she realized she was totally lost, and then through her own efforts, she made her way back to what was known as the Christos, which was the universal consciousness. And when Sophia then wed the Christos, this was the mystery of the bridal chamber. The writings of Paul, where he says, we must learn to make Christ our husband. He was applying to this idea of we must be like Sophia, where our soul actually marries the universal consciousness. It was understood that the Sophia represented our soul, and that each one of us fell to this realm that we exist in right now, and that our job is to work our way through it so that, again, we can unite with that universal consciousness. And when this happens, we will experience gnosis, or divine universal consciousness, and we'll experience it firsthand. So one of the things that the Templars did is they adopted as one of their personal symbols the seal of Abraxas. Abraxas was a Gnostic talisman who was said to be the son of Sophia. And according to the Gnostic cosmology, Abraxas was what was known as an archon, or a ruler, whose job was to keep people enslaved to the material realm until they had the keys to escape it. Once they had those keys, then they can break free to higher levels of consciousness. Abraxas's body was composed of 4 elements. He was a figure with snake legs. He was wearing an apron. He had a whip that he held in his hands, and he had a rooster head. A very strange looking figure. And he had 7 seals or 7 stars going up his body, and he was surrounded by the letters Iota, Alpha, and Omega on the Templar seal. The Templars adopted this because of several reasons. One is it represented the stages of baptism. It was believed that everybody was born into this earth world, which was represented by the serpent legs. The serpent crawls closest to the ground. But you had to be initiated into the realm of water, which was associated with the apron that hung around the abdomen, where all the liquid functions of the body take place. Water was associated with the emotions and the passions. Once you had learned to master your emotions and use them as an energy for transformation, as opposed to being consumed by your emotions, instead of drowning in your emotions, they believed that this was the symbolic of walking on water in the Bible, learning to stabilize your emotions so that they could hold you up as opposed to drowning in them. And then you can move on to the next level of initiation, which was the baptism by air. Air was associated with things of the mind, and it began with the study of the liberal arts and sciences. It was believed that by studying the things of the mind, eventually you came to realize that the mind was just an aspect of a greater mind, a greater consciousness in the universe, and that this was the beginning of being able to waken up to gnosis. Eventually, through study and personal revelation, your attachment to the old self, your attachment to the lower self that simply identified with the physical body, would begin to start to fade away or break down. And at that point, at a certain point, you symbolically died to your attachment to the physical body, and you had a higher self that awakened. And when this awoken, this was associated with fire, and it was associated with gnosis. And in Abraxas, it was represented by the rooster head that calls out to the light of the sun of the new day. The Gnostics referred to themselves as the sons of light. And so calling out to the light of the sun represented this direction towards gnosis. As the Templars studied these things, they met with other Gnostic groups that could be found throughout the Middle East and elsewhere, and compared and shared these philosophies. And they began to interject it into the architecture for the churches and the buildings that they were building throughout Europe. We find this within the Gothic cathedrals, in which the building was built as a giant human body in stone. It represented Mary, which is why it was called Notre Dame, Our Lady. And as it was hoped, the people went in there and attuned with their higher self. As they left it, they could be born as not just a Christian, but as a Christ, with the idea that they became embodiments of the universal consciousness. To further emphasize this idea, in many of the cathedrals that they built throughout Europe, they also incorporated a labyrinth. And this labyrinth represented the journey to Jerusalem, represented the pilgrimage. But rather than having to travel all the way from Europe to the Middle East, it was understood that the Holy Land that they were trying to get to was a place within yourself. And so by walking this labyrinth and meditating on your journey and meditating on who you are as you're solitarily walking this path, at times getting closer to the center and at other times falling away from it. But eventually, by the end, winding up in the center, you actually wind up in the center of yourself. And it was hoped that here you attain illumination, and so that then you're able to leave. Unfortunately, these same Gnostic ideas while very beautiful and bringing new understanding to religious texts, also became a little bit of a threat to Roman Catholic dogma, because if you don't need the intervention of a priest to get to heaven, well, that's bad for business. So the church became very weary of such ideas. And ultimately, this was one of the things that resulted in one of the Templars' downfalls. When they were eventually suppressed in 1307 and accused of heresy, one of the charges of heresy in particular was associated with their association with groups outside of the Roman Catholic faith and with philosophies and ideas outside of Roman Catholic dogma. Within the Gnostic tradition, they also recognized that just like with Hebrew, in Greek, every Greek letter also corresponded to a number, and so that there were numeric codes all throughout the Bible. And tied to this, they began to look at it in new ways. For example, one of the things they looked at was the story of the crucifixion of Jesus. It should be pointed out that Jesus was said to be crucified at Golgotha, a place which means skull. Well, the human skull has 22 bones in it, just like there are 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, just like there are 22 sections of Revelations. The 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav, which means cross. That's what Tav actually means in Hebrew. And in Greek, which would be the equivalent of the Greek letter Tau, Tau also means cross. Well, in Hebrew, this letter Tav is actually composed of 3 of the Hebrew letter vowels. So if you put 3 Hebrew letter vowels, or V's, together, they form the Hebrew letter Tav. Well, vow in Hebrew means nail. So at the end of the Hebrew alphabet, you have a cross and 3 nails. Not only that, but vow in Hebrew has a numeric value of 6. And therefore, 3 nails would be 666, which had nothing to do with the devil, but rather it was understood that this was a number of transformation, transforming from one thing out of the material into the spiritual. So the fact that this exists within the Hebrew alphabet, and that Hebrew existed long before Jesus was ever said to be around, implied that there was a symbolic code written on the Bible, and that this same symbolic code also applied to the Greek just as much as the Hebrew. The Templars began to look at this, and they began to look at these numeric codes and other symbolic codes throughout the New Testament, finding that, in fact, there appears to be deeper levels of meaning. One of the other things that was also looked at and was considered from a Gnostic standpoint was the spelling of the name Jesus. Jesus was spelled a particular way in Greek, but they wanted to look at how was this spelled in Hebrew. And there were different ways of spelling Jesus in Hebrew, but one of them, which would have been Yeshua in Hebrew, was spelled Yud He Shin Vav He. This was similar to the Hebrew spelling for the name of God, which is Yud He Vav He, only it has the Hebrew letter Shin in the center of it. Shin, as mentioned earlier, was associated with fire. So this became the hidden light, or the hidden fire of God. And with this understanding, it brought on new revelations which related directly to their understanding of what fire represented within the Gnostic tradition. It represented gnosis, or divine knowledge. With all of this understanding and this new interpretation of the Bible, it brought in a good shot of mysticism, both to the Old and the New Testaments, and allowed the Gnostics of the different branches, including the Kabbalists, the Jewish Kabbalists, and the Christian Gnostics, to form close associations within Europe via the Templars. As the Templars came across other Gnostic groups, they found that some of these Gnostic groups had also been studying something known as alchemy. One of the things that the Templars began looking into, or started adopting in particular, was a particular elixir that they created that was known as the wine of Jerusalem. And this particular wine was an aloe extract infused with hashish, which they had gained from their associations with a group known as the Hashishin, which had existed in areas like Syria. The same word of Hashishin later became known as where the root of the word assassin came from, because they were known to be cunning warriors, but they also used this substance known as hashish. In time, these groups also mentioned that the source of this knowledge came from the area of Egypt. And so the Templars, traveling further into Africa, into the Mediterranean, found themselves down into Giza. They had their own traditions of an area called Ras Tau, which later became associated with Ras, came to be associated with rose, and Tau was the Greek word for cross. So it was the land of the Rose Cross, from which later groups assumed the name of Rosicrucian. But the Templars adopted the symbol of the Rose Cross, specifically related to this area of Ras Tau in Egypt, which, as it turns out, was the ancient name for Giza. The word alchemy actually comes from alchem or alchemit, which was the ancient name for Egypt. Turns out that while in Egypt there was a group preserving knowledge of how certain herbs could have essences extracted from them, and that these essences could be used for making elixirs, which could do all kinds of things. And this was of great value to the Templars, who began to study it. Well, this was of great value to the Templars, who found ways of prolonging their lives and the lives of other people, as well as helping to heal. Up to this point, one of the only things that you could do if you had an infection in let's say a wound, is you could put honey in it, which was a natural antibacterial. Bacteria wouldn't survive more than 10 minutes in honey, so it was a way of helping to seal up the wound. The bacteria would be killed by the honey, which helped it to heal. But creating these new elixirs allowed other new potent ways of fighting disease. Applied to this process, they also believed that the air had a special vital component in it, which later came to be known as the symbolic mercury. In Eastern traditions, this became known as the ki or the chi that was within the air, but within the alchemical traditions that the Templars were studying, this became known as the mercury force. And so as the Templars came to understand this, they realized there must be some vital component to breath. And as a result of this, it was actually the Templars who were the first to develop CPR in order to resuscitate people. They reasoned that if there was a vital component in the breath, if they could artificially stimulate breath within people, they could potentially bring them back to life, which in fact they did. And this was deemed to be a miracle. The other thing that the Templars began to work with was certain mold extracts in order to produce medicines from these mold extracts. Well, we would now recognize that today, that's something we would call antibiotics. But this was something that the Templars were doing clear back in the 1200s through alchemical processes of extracting things out of mold extracts. They learned of this through, again, the groups that they were associating with in Egypt, who had their own traditions. The Templars set up areas of activity both at Dendera and at Philae in ancient Egypt, where they had preceptories and commanderies, and began to study everything they could about the hieroglyphs in the area, and began digging and looking within temple walls and associating with the different groups in those areas. And one of the great treasures that came out of this was further alchemical knowledge. The Templars also came across what were known as Hermetic texts through the Druze, or the Tahid's Mohidun group that they were associating with in areas primarily of Syria and Lebanon. And they venerated Hermes as a prophet, and they were preserving Greek Hermetic texts, and some even believe he had a text known as the Corpus Hermeticum, which was a mix of Egyptian and Greek ideas associated with Hermetic philosophy that tied in directly to alchemy. Hermes was believed to be the father of alchemy, so they were passing on these ideas. As the Templars came to understand these things, they incorporated the symbolism associated with this onto the cathedrals that they were building in Europe. Even to this day, if you go to the cathedrals of Notre Dame, you'll find depicted images of figures pulling salamanders out of Athanor ovens, which were alchemical ovens, and images of stars issuing forth essences, and images of Hermes himself being depicted on these cathedrals. Well, these aren't things that are found in the Bible. These are things that are found in Hermetic texts that the Templars are being exposed to with these groups in the Middle East. And the only way you can explain how these things wound up on these buildings in Europe is through the Templar Masons who were incorporating them onto there, because they were the only ones that were traveling back and forth between the Middle East as they associated with these groups and then bringing them into Europe. This is one of the proofs that the Templars were actually involved in the financing and the building and the philosophies that were going into these cathedrals. Not to mention the sciences, the math, and the geometry that went into these things. And to celebrate this memory of this tradition of Ras Tau at Giza, of course, the cathedrals, when viewed from the air, look like crosses, but on all of these cathedrals, they also put these rose windows, thus making them rose crosses. Rose cross, Ras Tau, the ancient name for Giza, from which they were getting this alchemical knowledge. The Templars were known for living for much longer than most people during their day and age, and many people believed it had to do directly with this alchemical knowledge. And in fact, even the book Parsifal refers to the Holy Grail as a stone that burns the phoenix to ashes, after which it comes back renewed. And it says that the Templars used this stone to help keep them young. And they said that this, in the book Parsifal, it says this stone is known as the Grail. Well, this is an alchemical metaphor, and it ties in directly to this idea of preserving this alchemical knowledge that had come from the ancient world, had become lost for a while, and then was rediscovered by the Templars and brought back to Europe. It went even deeper though, because the Templars began to understand that part of the process of this alchemy involves extracting a secret salt. To the Templars, they knew that the sacred texts in these groups referred to this secret salt as the precious white stone and as the hidden manna. They believed this was the hidden manna of the Bible. Within the Albigensian tradition, from which the original 9 Templars largely came out of, they practiced a special ceremony known as the Mani Sola ceremony, which had to do with a communion rite with this white stone, which was said to be these alchemical salts that could be extracted out of things. So the Templars started utilizing this secret salts, the secret hidden manna that could be extracted alchemically in their communion, their secret communion rites and their initiation ceremonies. In fact, it was believed both within the Templar ceremonies and within some of the secret Sufi traditions that were starting to flourish at the time, that they had the same types of initiation ceremonies, one of which was referred to as the sharing of the salt ceremony. And this sharing of the salt was actually the secret manna, the secret white substance that was removed from matter. We now know what this substance is. For a long time, it was believed to be, it was just referred to as manna. Manna in Hebrew means, what is it? And it's referred to as manna, or what is it, because it doesn't react to anything. If you do mix it with other chemicals, it doesn't react to anything, so there's no way of knowing what it is that way. If you do a burn test on it, it doesn't, the flame doesn't show up as anything. Therefore, they didn't know what it was, so they called it what it is, which is, what is it? Manna. Well, this was the white stone. This was the manna, and they believed that this was the original stone that was found in the communal rites. And it was this same white stone that was put in the Ark of the Covenant, was believed to be stored in the Ark of the Covenant, according to Revelations. And the same white stone was referred to in Revelations, where it says, "To he who overcometh will be given the hidden manna in the white stone." This white stone was said to have tremendous healing properties, so that it actually resulted in, it could be added to any elixir and make it 100 times more potent than it was prior to that. They also found that if they took this white stone and they tweaked it and added certain other substances to it, that it would turn red. And this new red substance looked and tasted like blood, and it was 1,000 times more potent than even the manna. And so this red substance they began to refer to as the blood of Christ. And between the manna, the original manna substance, and the blood of Christ, they believed this was the original communion that was being alluded to in the Old Testament with Melchizedek, the prophet Melchizedek, as he initiated Abraham, and later in the New Testament with Jesus. Today we know that this manna is actually monoatomic atoms. It's platinum monoatomic atoms. And that these substances, most atoms bind with other atoms, but when atoms are in a monoatomic state or a high spin state, the outer valence ring of the atom is completely captured by the nucleus, so it doesn't bind with anything. It enters into a high spin state, and each grain of this atom of this substance is 1 atom thick. Because it is white, because it's in a high spin state, it completely reflects light, so it appears completely as white. And this is what makes it be the precious white stone, and it has other incredible properties which will become known in the future. The Templars discovered a terrible secret, which, while philosophically it wasn't a problem for them based on their own private secret beliefs, it became a major problem for the Roman Catholic dogma. As the Templars were in Jerusalem, they found a number of different artifacts. And they were digging a number of different places. Certainly they were digging under Solomon's temple and around the area what was believed to be Solomon's temple, or certainly the ruins of the Second Temple. But one of the places they started digging around was other areas of Jerusalem. As they were looking around the area of East Jerusalem, they discovered old tombs. And one of these old tombs that they went into, they found a terrible secret. In breaking through the wall of an old tomb, the Templars had found that oftentimes there were mysteries of private sacred texts, inscriptions, and everything else found within the burial chambers of people. They certainly found this within Egypt. That's something that archaeologists to this day continue to do. But as the Templars were breaking into tombs, literally in the area of East Jerusalem, they came across a particular tomb, and in breaking through the wall and entering inside, they found a series of ossuaries. Now, an ossuary is a stone box, which usually has writing on the outside, and contained within these boxes are bones of the deceased. And sometimes other things are put in there as well, including little jars or jewelry that contain special things associated with that individual. Well, in this particular tomb in East Jerusalem, the Templars found ossuaries that had contained within them the names of what appeared to be very significant people from the New Testament. they found a particular ossuary with the name of Yeshua, or Jesus, on it. Another one with Mary of Magdal, which would have been Mary Magdalene. Another one with what appeared to be their children, and another ossuary with John the Baptist. The Templars, having come from a pretty strict theological background, realized this was a bit of a problem of a discovery, because Jesus was said to have bodily raised to heaven, and yet here was an ossuary that seemed to be containing his name, and it was his entire family. Putting the pieces together, they quickly came to realize a dangerous secret, which was not only were Jesus and Mary Magdalene married, but they had children. And it appears that Mary Magdalene had also previously been married to John the Baptist, and that they had children as well, and that they were all buried together inside this tomb. Well, this was a secret that had the potential to destroy the dogma of Christianity at the time. Now, this wasn't too much of a problem for Templars, because in their Gnostic associations, they had come to associate the stories of Jesus as largely being metaphors anyways, and to being applied to us personally. So they interpreted the death and raising of, or awakening, the anastasis of Jesus, which is sometimes interpreted as resurrection, as being a metaphor for our own awakening to higher levels of consciousness. The Gnostics also had a belief in reincarnation, so it wasn't improper from a Gnostic standpoint to consider the fact that we could die and then come back again in a new form while being reincarnated. But to most of the people of Europe, this was a foreign concept, and the idea that it was believed that Jesus had literally achieved bodily resurrection. And in fact, this is something that churches, for the most part, teach to this day. Finding a tomb, what appeared to be the body of Jesus, along with his wife, Mary Magdalene, which again, this is a real problem, because this was not in standard church doctrine as being acceptable either, and that they had children is bad enough, but then recognizing that Mary Magdalene appears to have also had children with John the Baptist, and that Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist prior to being married to Jesus, just created all kinds of problems. And it was something that flew in the face of what church dogma was back then, and continues to be to this day. So the Templars, in realizing this, had a real problem. They, of course, reported it to the Pope, and the Pope wanted to do everything he could to keep this knowledge secret. The Roman Church at the time had a business of having people believe that in bodily resurrection, and that you had to go through the church in order to do it. This is what kept the church in business, so to speak. That's what allowed them to make money. It's what allowed them to have an influence in the lives of people. And the fear was, if people found out that there may be a different way of looking at it, that it could really hurt their standing and their role in all of European society, and in fact, in the world at large. The Templars immediately took carefully and reverently and respectfully assembled the bones, took them out of the ossuaries. They left the ossuaries there, put them in new boxes, and proceeded to move these artifacts out of the Holy Land, moving them in various stages through different secret transports into Europe, with the idea that eventually they can hang on to this stuff in Paris till they knew what to do with it. With this dangerous secret, the Roman Church pretty much allowed the Templars to do whatever they wanted. The Templars realized that this could actually be a good blackmail chip, if you will, because they could hold this over the church's head and reveal this to the world at any point. And this kind of forced the church's hand for a little while in giving the Templars whatever they needed to help build civilization throughout the rest of Europe. Again, they interpreted the scriptures from a symbolic standpoint. And so they believed that everybody symbolically has to lose identification with the physical world and eventually attain the light of understanding known as gnosis, and that this is where the salvation came in, not in believing in a bodily resurrection. But it was a tough pill to swallow for the Pope, and it remained a dangerous secret. The Templars also knew that the minute they turned this over to the Roman Church, that it would disappear, and they would no longer have it as a bargaining chip. So they proceeded to hang on to these items and pass them around. They also reasoned, well, if Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and they had children, that this was in line with their own Gnostic beliefs, and that Jesus must have represented the Christos, and Mary Magdalene must have represented the Sophia, and that the wedding of the Christos and the Sophia was represented within the lives of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. This was philosophically not a problem for the Templars, and they could take this and they could apply it to their own lives. They began to look at Mary Magdalene as more of a high initiate or a priestess within the tradition. She certainly, the role she fulfilled in the Bible was one that they found within the ancient world of the mythos associated with Isis on the Egyptian walls. In the role of Isis in, as they were finding at the temple of Isis at Philae, where in Egypt, where the Templars had their headquarters. And so they had also found these statues of Isis with the baby Horus sitting on her leg. And the Templars started to bring replicas of these over into Europe, and these became the early Black Madonna statues that can be found all over Europe. They reasoned that if Mary Magdalene was a priestess of this tradition, and she represented the Sophia, that those myths of Sophia probably came from these myths of Isis, and that the Black Madonnas then concealed this terrible secret that not only did all this tradition probably come from Egypt, that Mary Magdalene was probably a priestess of the Isis tradition. Jesus himself was probably passing on the Egyptian knowledge. Again, this was philosophically not a problem for the Templars. Even they knew it was counter to what the church doctrine and dogma was at the time. They were already applying these things personally to themselves, where Mary Magdalene represented the human soul as it fell to this world, worked out its problems, and then eventually wed with the Christos, the universal consciousness. So in the same way, it made sense that Mary Magdalene participated in her role in the world, and then married Jesus, who represented the Christos, the embodiment of the Christos. And they reasoned that if they had children, then there must be a lineage that still existed tied to this. This took on a new meaning associated with the Holy Grail, because one of the names for the Holy Grail was Sang Graal, and in a simple wordplay, This came to be known as holy blood, which represented the holy bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. As the Templars brought this knowledge back to Europe, they realized there were, in fact, certain families, certainly within France and also within Scotland and other words, that were preserving aspects of this tradition, and that the knowledge base that they had found in their travels was also being preserved by these same families. And so they reasoned that the secret of the holy blood wasn't some sort of magical powers in the blood. It was the fact that this bloodline was preserving knowledge from the ancient world. Knowledge, in fact, that may go all the way back to the famed lost civilization of Atlantis, and knowledge related to a different interpretation of Scripture. This different interpretation defined a personal relationship between self and a greater God consciousness. And it was reasoned that this bloodline was the protectors of this knowledge. The Templars at this point then set on the new responsibility of protecting those within this bloodline because they're the ones who could understand and interpret all the knowledge that was being brought back. Later, when the Roman Church decided enough, we can't deal with the Templars having this knowledge. It's too much of a thing that they're able to hold above our head. And when King Philip the Fair of France decided that they needed the Templar resources and money in order to fund his own war campaigns, and he decided to suppress the Templars, the church completely went along with it because they wanted access to the holy treasures and to these holy bones, so that it wouldn't be a problem. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, because the Templars already planned for a day when these things might have to be hidden somewhere outside of Europe. They had already been doing their explorations of the New World. They were already starting to map areas across the Atlantic and North America. And they already began setting to work setting up certain vaults within the Americas to hide artifacts such as these, to ensure they wouldn't fall into the hands of people who would use them for the wrong reasons or who may make them disappear. One of the things that the Templars came across again and again and again, whether they were meeting with the Mandeans in Iraq or as they traveled as far away as India and encountered groups there on the Indian subcontinent, was the role of a goddess figure. They had been exposed to the idea of God, and they knew of the Mother Mary from the New Testament. But here they were talking with traditions that suggested that no, there's a feminine aspect to divinity as well, which at the time was being completely neglected within Europe. Even in Ethiopia, as they looked at the traditions there that talked about King Solomon and his wife, the Queen of Sheba, they had their traditions that talked about the Hebrew god Yahweh. But even Yahweh had a consort or a wife known as Asherah. It became very clear that these models of divinity were androgynous. Even the name Yahweh was composed of the Hebrew letter Yud, which represented the male active force, and Ave, which was actually the word for Eve, and was a female principle, which made Yahweh both a masculine and a feminine attribute. Yahweh himself was said to have a wife by the name of Asherah, and Asherah could be composed of the words Ashe, which was actually Isis from the Egyptian traditions, and Ra, which was the male active principle within the Egyptian tradition. So even this too was a balance of female and then masculine aspects. So they saw this being encountered again and again and again. And as a result, they began to devote themselves to the female principle. Even beyond this, One of the fundamental planets that the Templars were using with their navigation, their sea navigation with celestial alignments, was the planet Venus, because it was very predictable. It aligned 5 times with Earth on the other side of the sun every 8 years, forming a perfect pentagram in the sky. And knowing this, they could use this to map a number of things, and it helped them with their navigations. So Venus then became very significant within their cosmology, and of course Venus herself was a goddess type of figure.
So there's the great goddess, and then there's all these minor goddesses, but really they're all just a metaphor for her, the great goddess. So back in earlier times, we had the Druids, we had all different cultures, the Greeks, that were very much aware of what was going on in their surroundings. They noticed during the change of the seasons, the sun would die, the male deity would die off in the winter, and then he would return. But part of his return was due to the goddess. But this is more an astronomical phenomenon. So we had all these different aspects of the goddess, not only on earth, but in the heavens. And in that situation, back in that time period, as the sun would approach the winter solstice, like it was dying, and all the plants had died and it was cold, people would worry, is it going to come back, or is it going to keep going? Well, who would save him? The goddess in the heavens, and it would be Sirius. The star Sirius would be on the horizon at that time, and it just so happened that, as viewed from Earth, it looked like she was stopping the sun. Now, to the Egyptians, Sirius was Isis. So this became something that indicated to humans that the role of the feminine was very important in saving the sun god. So we would then see the change of seasons happen after that phenomenon, and it all got wrapped in lore and associations. So people observed that the sacred feminine, or the goddess, was present as Mother Earth, where life would spring forth in early spring, and as the plants matured and as crops matured, we'd see another thing that would happen in the fall, and that was when the harvest would happen. And at that time, we had another thing that was going on in the heavens, and that was the constellation of Virgo was overhead, also known as the Virgin. So that would be the time period of the ancient mystery schools in Eleusis, the Eleusinian mysteries, and that was when the harvest was celebrated and the bounty of the goddess was celebrated. So these are all traditions, and of course the most important thing of all was that the females are the life givers. And that's what became part of the whole Templar tradition. And in Freemasonry, it's all saved, because 2,000 years ago we had the Romans, the Roman Catholic Church was trying to demonize the feminine and raise the masculine aspect. Whereas before in history, it had always been a dual nature, male and female, heaven and earth, the balance. It was all in balance, and they tipped it out of balance. The Templar tradition, Freemasonry, it's all preserved in there. Sometimes even the Masons aren't even aware of what's being preserved, but it's in there. My co-author, Alan Butler, who is a Templar expert over in Europe, he and I began working together on some of these concepts. And one of the things that we noticed was about Washington, D.C. that stood out as indicating that there is this goddess tradition that is being preserved there is, first of all, the shape of Washington, D.C. was a diamond. That's a very much a feminine shape that is a symbol of the goddess. Also, the fact that Washington, D.C. is partly in Maryland, Maryland, and partly in Virginia, Virgin land, right, was another indicator. And not to mention, the actual name of Washington, D.C. is the District of Columbia. Columbia being Columbae, which is Latin for dove, also a symbol of the goddess. So just in that aspect alone, we have some goddess indicators. But what's there in the city itself? The city, if anybody who walks around D.C. will notice immediately that there are many, many, many goddess statues, especially the one that sits on top of the Capitol building, which is Columbia. It's not called that, it's called Freedom officially, but that's really who she is. Columbia is the goddess of the United States of America. And we also see that there's some things in our history. For example, the Constitution was signed in September, the week of September 17th, that time period, and that was on purpose, we believe, because that is the traditional time of the Eleusinian mysteries, the mysteries of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. And at that time period, as I said earlier, that is when the constellation of Virgo is directly overhead. Virgo, the Virgin, also. So we see a lot of these indicators around the city. But one of the really amazing things that we figured out is the Washington Monument itself has a very pronounced shadow that points to things around the National Mall on key dates, where the tip of the shadow touches certain things. But it's the key dates that makes it important. It's not just a big sundial. And one of those is on September 17th, Constitution Day, the shadow goes right up the steps of the Capitol building and knocks on the door. And that's just amazing. We were there in Washington, D.C. not too long ago, last year, for the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And we had an opportunity, my husband Scott Wolter and I, to chase the shadow and watch it move towards the Capitol. And it moved a lot faster than we thought it would. But you have to stay in the tip of the shadow to know where it's actually going. And so we did that. And the best way to do that is to stand back, look up at the Washington Monument, use your phone, because you can't look right at the sun. Take pictures, and what you want ideally to see is the sun sitting right on top of the monument, and it's just fantastic. So we did that, and that was really fun. But a few years before that, we had been out there in the wintertime on the winter solstice, and Alan Butler and I had a theory that the shadow on the shortest, darkest day of the year would actually be the only time of year where it could touch and actually just penetrate the edge of the ellipse, which sits just south of the White House. The ellipse is an egg-shaped or elliptical-shaped open grassy area in the city. And it's really what we now have come to realize is an egg, the sacred feminine. And we were right. At that time of year, the shadow just penetrates the edge of the ellipse. And it's because the sun is at its lowest point on the horizon, and the shadow can reach there. And we were blown away by that. If that's not a sign of commemorating the fertility of the sun with Mother Earth, I don't know what else is. So on the 4th of July, which was another key date in American history, we thought there has to be something that the shadow does on the 4th of July. There's something called the Jefferson Pier, which is a little square, sort of pyramidion-shaped concrete marker. And what it's marking is when Thomas Jefferson was president, he wanted to have a new prime meridian for the United States. And he designated that as 16th Street, which runs north-south down through the White House, down through the ellipse, and beyond, down toward where what ended up being the Jefferson Memorial eventually. So there's a little marker there that indicates that was his meridian. Now, it never got passed in Congress, so it didn't happen. And we stuck with the Greenwich prime meridian. But on the 4th of July, the shadow tip touches Jefferson's little pier, which is really cool for the 4th of July. And there's other places, again, like I said, around the mall. But the engineering aspect of being able to construct the Washington Monument and place it where they did at a time period when we didn't have calculators, we didn't have computers. This was all mathematics and astronomy calculations that were done by hand. And I'm blown away by that. There's an amazing alignment in New York City, in Manhattan, that is made up of 3 obelisks. One of those obelisks, which was the last one to be placed in its position in the city, is a real Egyptian obelisk that came over on a ship in the 1800s, the late 1800s, 1880, I believe. And they had to actually cut a hole in the hull of the ship to put the obelisk in and then patch around it and send it over here. It's called Cleopatra's Needle. So there was a real Egyptian obelisk that was brought over, and it was paid for by William Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, because he had paid for this, and he was also a Freemason, had the honor of being able to say where the obelisk would be placed in the city. Well, he ended up placing it where it is in Central Park now, behind what is now the Met Museum. He placed it there, though, for a reason, because it was to finish what had already been started by earlier Freemasons, which was a line of obelisks that went from south to north. that are actually mimic almost exactly the belt stars of Orion, which to the Egyptians, going back in time, was Osiris. Osiris was the god of resurrection. And these belt stars are very important because they point to things in the heavens. In one case, they point to the star Sirius, which was Isis to the Egyptians. And if you go the other direction, they go to Aldebaran, which was the eye of Taurus. And also beyond that, it's a slight angle to Pleiades. Pleiades was another star system that was thought of as a sacred feminine thing, the Nine Sisters, they called it. So back to the obelisk in New York, this alignment, if you follow it, it goes from Cleopatra's Needle, going south to the Worth obelisk by the Flatiron Building, and farther south down to St. Paul's Chapel, down by Ground Zero. St. Paul's Chapel has an obelisk there that's the Emmet obelisk, but there's no Emmet buried underneath it. So these obelisks are really what is an amazing temple to Osiris. And we had a clue, Alan Butler and I, when we were researching this, that there was something going on. Because in Grand Central Station, which was built by the Vanderbilts, Grand Central Station has a starry ceiling painted on it. And all the constellations are there. But there's one, and only one, that's painted in reverse. And that's Orion. Why is Orion painted backwards? And the Vanderbilts have been asked about this over the years, and they all smile and say, it's perfectly correct. Because if you know what's going on in the city, if the city is a temple to Orion, Osiris, then it's meant to be viewed from above. And if it's viewed from above, then it's perfectly correct. But there's one thing more. If you follow that line of obelisks out into the harbor, who's out there? Isis, right? The Statue of Liberty, shining her light for all to see. And I think it's just a beautiful, hidden in plain sight example of the goddess being front and center, always present, but carefully veiled to protect her.
Damn. You know, the beauty about all of this is that once well, first of all, you have to read before like any of these videos really, really sink in. You know what I'm saying? Like before any of these videos can really honestly sink in, you have to read stuff and it comes back and forth with you, and then one particular research or direction can take you this particular way, and all of a sudden you find yourself there again, like it's a full circle. You get what I'm saying? So for all of you Christmas Christians that galore over this land and its flag and its cross and its Jesus and its religion, right? Or any of y'all that really have given yourselves over to the flesh of what they've created here, man, oh man, are you in for a rude awakening? And this is why I kept saying, you guys stop saying this is a Christian country. It's absolutely never has been. It was structured, and by who? In 1776. Right. And that whole BS story regarding these Templars associating with our gente here, then if that was the case, like I was saying earlier, we would have traded with you guys for that type of material that you carried. Hello? Why would we not? That would be the smart thing to do if we've never dealt with metal, because supposedly you guys got here, never was there any metal, copper maybe, those type of elements, but not metal, like swords, like your shields, like your armor that you wore, right? Because we read about that. So we weren't familiar with that shit. So if we were already dealing with y'all prior to Cristobal Colon or Coulon, then why in the world did we not have already that material here? You know what I'm saying? Why in the world? Makes no sense. Yeah, and by the way, that whole TikTok, that's why I don't like TikTok, man. It's like certain people can say shit on that damn app, and then certain people can't. At least here on YouTube, it's fucking fair and square, maybe strict, but at least it's fair in a way. You know what I'm saying? people here just, they choose what they can or can't say. A lot of times, a lot of people on YouTube, they're always asking for money, so they watch what they say. You know what I'm saying? Anyhow, so before, let's see. Now, I'm going to play this now because, again, it goes back to what I've been bringing out for, God, man, I don't know. You guys got to go back into this channel. There are some videos that I've done in the past, like a year or almost a year and a half, regarding these particular things, the Kabbalah, the Talmudics, the practices of the Sifra, the concept, the connections between Freemasons, Druids, Christianity, Judaism, all of those things. Islam as well. I mean, I really didn't jump on it, but you know what I'm saying? But technically. Anyhow, let's continue.
The ziggurat of Babylon. Serpents encircling rings and globes and issuing from globes are common in the Persian, Egyptian, Chinese, and Indian monuments. Vishnu is represented reposing on a coiled serpent, so many of their symbolism refers to the ancient deities. The serpent with the tail in the mouth is the universal serpent, the life giver. The serpent is the symbol and prototype of the universal Savior, who redeems the world by giving creation the knowledge of itself and the realization of good and evil. Manly Palmer Hall, 33-degree Freemason. So it is the serpent that gives you a knowledge of good and evil, and he is the one who is deified. You'll see skulls and babies representing life and death, cycles of life and death, reincarnation. It sees forwards and backwards. Often these are half white, half black, representing the knowledge of light and the knowledge of darkness. And whether you worship the dark side or whether you worship the light side doesn't really make any difference. That is why it is interesting that the light side worshippers are known as Luciferians and the dark side are known as witches, wizards, and Satanists. And they are the best of friends because the deity is the same. It doesn't matter which vehicle you use to get to know him, it is the same deity. Cosmic keys, the answer to heaven and Hades. Pagan religious symbols are also very common in Freemasons. Athene, Earth, Ceres, Hermes, very common one that they use. All Jesuit cathedrals will have the symbol of Hermes. And of course, Masonry claims that it uses Hermetic rites. Hermes, son of Mes, son of Ham, if you like, from the very beginning. We haven't got time to go into all the details. So Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, all these symbols represent deities. Morals and Dogma, page 851, the 32nd degree, this is the highest degree. The hermaphroditic figure, there you have him, male, female, is the symbol of the double nature anciently assigned to the deity. Now remember that the Knights Templars also worship Baphomet, who was a hermaphrodite, male, female. As generator and producer of Brahm and Maya and Osiris, whatever, we don't have to go into all the details. So if we go through Scottish Rite Masonry, the 33rd degree is known as Sovereign Grand Inspector General. It's an honorary degree for the highest Masons, and you have to be a high initiate to get into that. And then you get down Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret is the 32nd, and you go all the way down, 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 until you get down here to the blue degrees, which are Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason, and you can go up all the way almost to the top and never know what you're doing. Never know what you're actually involved in.
Let's check out Walter Veit. This is from Total Onslaught about the secret societies. Nobody's done a better job than Walter Veit when it comes to secret societies and many other subjects. He's one of those guys in his church, Seventh Adventist Church, that we truly need to respect and give him his flowers, because his research and his commitment to God is on another level. So here's the secret to societies, the society's secrets. however you want to put it, but he's revealing a lot of information that most of us have never heard. I never heard none of this stuff until I saw this, and he opened my eyes. Walter White revealing the secrets that are told by secret societies.
The title of tonight's lecture is Hidden Agendas, because that's exactly what this is about. It's about hidden agendas. In the previous lectures, we spoke about the origin of secret societies and how they are controlled. And we saw that they originate from Babylon, which gave rise to Kabbalism and also to Islamic secret societies, the Ismailis, the Qarmatites, the Fatimites, the Druzes, and the Assassins, which we haven't dealt with as such. Out of Kabbalism eventually came Gnosticism, which replaces Jesus Christ with a universal Messiah, who today is called the Cosmic Christ. And this Cosmic Christ has none of the attributes of the Jesus Christ of the Bible, but in order to make him acceptable to the world, everybody will have to accept him. That means Jesus Christ, even amongst Christians, will have to be brought lower to a level of this Cosmic Christ to accommodate all others who want to be his equal. According to Eliphas Levi, Gnosticism was founded by Simon Magus, who was a sorcerer and put on a cloak of Christianity. He was the one who had himself baptized, but he was rebuked by Peter for wanting to buy the Holy Spirit. So a cloak of Christianity covered Gnosticism. Out of this philosophy, eventually it became formalized, and the Knights Templars, within a large religious system, were the harborers of the ancient philosophy. In other words, they were the harborers of the secret of Gnosticism. They had very close ties with the Islamic societies, and eventually we saw that the Knights Templars were suppressed by the King of France. Many of them escaped, however, to Spain, where the king in Spain gave them his protection, and they flourished further, and their rites and rituals and degrees were perpetuated in subsequent organizations. So the Templars never really died, other than in name. The Templar secret knowledge was kept alive in an inner circle in Rosicrucianism and overseen by the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order then created Freemasonry, as we saw, on Sunday, and Freemasonry is the so-called Protestant arm, if you like, although it's not only a Protestant arm, it is an international arm to bring about those changes which are necessary to set up this dark kingdom. So tonight we're going to have a look at Freemasonry and look behind the scenes as to what it really entails. Because most Freemasons, like in all secret societies, are fully unaware of what happens behind the scenes. You will remember that Gary H. Carr, in his work On Route to Global Occupation, gave a very similar expose. He also takes it through Kabbalism, Gnosticism to the Knights Templars. Then he misses out on the Jesuit connection, which is the military powerful arm controlling all these things. And he has Freemasonry control Marxism, American, European secret political societies, international banking elite, and then, scarily, the World Council of Churches. Now, this is not me saying this is this man, and he is no small fish. And theosophical societies, together with many cults, then constitute what is known as the New Age movement. And the New Age movement is much larger than what we believe just to be a few esoterics doing their thing. It culminates in an entire system which is to unite the entire world, and the World Council of Churches will play a very prominent role in this mechanism. So it's very important that we know what Freemasonry stands for. The outer shell of Freemasonry proposes to sell whatever religion is prominent in that area. So, for example, if you are living in a Muslim country and you belong to Freemasonry, then the religion that is propagated at the level of the people and at the lower level of Freemasonry will be Islam. If you are living in a Jewish environment, then of course the religion will be Judaism. If you are living in a Christian environment, then the Bible will be the central book in a lodge, and as far as the lower echelon of the members is concerned, Christianity will be the basis for the movement. But in actual fact, if it is controlled by another power inside, then the picture can be totally different. Now, I'm going to quote tonight from the very, very best sources. I'm not going to use any hearsay. I'm not going to use thus said so-and-so and so-and-so about so-and-so through so-and-so. No, we're going to go to the original sources, the very best. The book Morals and Dogma is a book written by Albert Pike. It is considered the central theology of Freemasonry. Only the highest Freemasons receive this book, and upon their death, this book must be returned to the lodge. So this is not something that is readily available. Today, you can go on the internet and you can order Morals and Dogma, but you will never receive the real McCoy. Unless you by chance happen to find someone where a Freemason has died and the book has never been returned, and after a few generations somebody finds it, and some of these copies are actually floating around, and there you can find the original information. In my own case, I have many documents because my father-in-law was very, very high up in these issues, and when he died, I obtained a fair amount of information that would probably not be available to most people. And in my researches for many, many years, I searched for the original documents so that we can have it out of the horse's mouth. So if you feel upset about what I'm saying tonight, remember, I will be saying nothing. I will be quoting. And then you make your own minds up as to whether this is so or whether this is not so. Morals and Dogma, the very highest source in Freemasonry. page 870. The Templars, like all other secret orders and associations, had two doctrines. One concealed and reserved for the masters, which was Johannism. The other public, which was the Roman Catholic. It's quite straightforward. So there is a doctrine that is being taught to the masses, and the masses are the uninitiated. Marx called them cattle. They are also called catechumens. They are called goyim. They are called all kinds of derogatory names. Now, if the outer shell, the teaching of the Templars to the people, was Catholicism, they also, of course, adopted a very pious garb and pretended this was the crux of their religion. But on the inside, they had another religion, and the order that they ascribed to is Johannism. Now, we have many orders of St. John today, many orders. Well, just think about some of the large organizations. You have cathedrals to St. John, where some very strange things happen, as we will see as we go along over time. We have St. John's Ambulance, for example. You know, we could go on and on and on and on, but I don't want to go into too much detail here. All of these are organizations which are philanthropic, seem to be doing a very good thing. They run many, many hospitals. They give huge sums of money to the poor and to children's hospitals, to the crippled people in the world. And being so philanthropic, it is very hard to pin something negative to organizations that appear to do so much good. And this is actually the best cloak into which to clothe something else that should not be discovered. So whenever you see Johannism, supposedly, of course, from John the Baptist, then eye it with suspicion. So two doctrines, one to the outside and one to the inside. Morals and Dogma, page 820. The Templars were gravely accused of spitting upon Christ and denying God at their receptions, of gross obscenities, conversations with female devils, and the worship of monstrous idol. Now, we discussed that in the previous lecture. The end of the drama is well known, and how Jacques de Molay and his fellows perished in the flames. But, now this is the highest source of Freemasonry. But before his execution, the chief of the doomed order organized and instituted what afterwards came to be called the occult, hermetic, or Scottish Masonry. You cannot get a higher source than this. So according to Albert Pike, Freemasonry continued the legacy of the Templars. In the gloom of his prison, the Grand Master created 4 metropolitan lodges, at Naples for the east, at Edinburgh for the west, at Stockholm for the north, and at Paris for the south. The initials of his name, JBM, found in the same order in the first 3 degrees, are but one of the many internal and cognate proofs that such was the origin of modern Freemasonry. That's from the horse's mouth. So the Templars aren't really dead, but still alive. In fact, in the York Rite, there is a level which is the Templar level. So everything is there. The 32nd degree of Masonry, Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret, that's the highest level of Scottish Freemasonry. There is one higher degree, the 33rd degree, but that is an honorary degree. So the highest level of Freemasonry is the 32nd. Again, Morals and Dogma. The occult science of the ancient Magi was concealed under the shadows of the ancient mysteries. It was imperfectly revealed, or rather disfigured, by the Gnostics. They don't show the whole picture. It was guessed at under the obscurities that covered the pretended crimes of the Templars, and it is found enveloped in enigmas that seem impenetrable in the rites of the highest Masonry. Do you have that? So out of the horse's mouth, the mystery of the ancient Magi and the shadows of the ancient mysteries are present and known to the highest levels of Freemasonry. None of the lower levels know anything about this. They come into the lodge and they think it is a Christian society with, well, at least with Christian flavor, if they're in a Christian lodge, and that they are a brotherhood for doing good unto others. Well, this is San Salvador. This is in Mallorca, where the Templars, of course, found protection under the Spanish kings. And if you go into the Templar enclave, you will find on the altars of the churches, remember that the Templars were an order of the Roman Catholic Church, like the Jesuits are today, the most powerful order within the church, so they were the most powerful order in the church that controlled not only the military aspects, because they were knights, but they also controlled the financial aspects. And the double-headed eagle was part and parcel of their symbolism. Two heads. Janus had two heads. He looked forwards and he looked backwards. If you go into the other churches, you will find them on the altars. There it is above the altar of the churches on Mallorca. Now this is Rosicrucianism. The rose is a symbol of their deity. Now, I really don't get too upset about symbols. If I had to be upset about every symbol, I would have to throw everything out of my house or anything that is manufactured, because they all have the symbols on them. We are living in this world, but we don't have to be part of this world. And we can do things whether there's a symbol on or not, because obviously a symbol means nothing. But it's just interesting to know. It's like reading another language. Well, here are some of the occult teachings of Rosicrucianism, where you have the zipharots, the levels that you can attain to, and this is pure Kabbalism. Now you must understand that in the Kabbalah, it is not Yahweh who is the true ruler, it is Lucifer who is the true ruler. But we will come to that as we come later. And the zipharots are emanations of his appearance. So let's ask Morals and Dogma again what it has to say about the Kabbalah, which, by the way, is called the most holy Kabbalah today. The Talmud is called the Holy Talmud, and the Bible is just called the Torah. Isn't that strange? The Bible is called the Torah, and then a book of rules that never appear in the Bible is called the Holy Talmud. And an occult book is called the Most Holy Kabbalah. And I would like to venture so far as that there are very, very, very few rabbis in the world today that are not Kabbalists, which is scary. The Holy Kabbalah, or tradition of the children of Set, this is of course not true. According to this doctrine, then, Set would have been an apostate already. Or they turn it around, they say not an apostate, an initiate. So there's an internal doctrine for the initiate and a public doctrine for the goyim, for the cattle, just to keep them occupied. Tradition of the children of Set was carried from Chaldea by Abraham, taught to the Egyptian priesthood by Joseph, recovered and purified by Moses, concealed under symbols in the Bible, revealed by the Savior to St. John, there you have it again, the Johansonites, and contained entire under hieratic figures analogous to those that all antiquity in the apocalypse of that apostle. Okay, so now he's turned everything around. Abraham, Joseph, Moses were all initiates, and what they taught to the people was drivel, let's put it that way, to keep them happy and to keep them uninformed. But on the inside they had another doctrine. Now that's of course not true, because Moses wrote the Torah. And everything they believe is the opposite of what the Torah teaches. And the Kabbalah, that book, turns the Torah upside down and makes it occult. The three great lights of the lodge are symbols to us of the power, wisdom, and beneficence of the deity. They are also symbols of the first three Sephirots, emanations of this deity, according to the Kabbalah. So the Kabbalah is very, very central in this story. We read on. Every Masonic lodge is a temple of religion, although they are told that it is not a temple of religion. Here, Morals and Dogma says it is a temple of religion, and its teachings are instructions in religion. This is true religion revealed to the ancient patriarchs. Now we've seen that they've turned the ancient patriarchs upside down into occultists in order to sell this to the people, of course, which Masonry has taught for many centuries and which it will continue to teach as long as time endures. Okay, thank you. Let's ask some questions, and we'll ask Masonry to answer it. And the sources we will use are only the highest Masonic writings. And the Freemasons that will be asked to give answers will be of only the very highest degree. So Albert Mackey, he wrote the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. You cannot get a better source than that. Most of the best lodges, the greatest lodges, have the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. And he was a 33-degree Freemason, which means he was an initiate. Is Freemasonry a Christian organization? If Freemasonry were simply a Christian institution, the Jew, the Muslim, the Brahmin, the Buddhist could not conscientiously partake of its illumination. So it's not a Christian institution. So why is the Bible there? It's there as a symbol, as we saw, of the first three Sephiroths. Is it Christian? Freemasonry is not Christian, nor a substitute for it. Well, what is it then? Morals and Dogma. Rejecting all the wild and useless speculations of the Zendavesta, the Kabbalah, the Gnostics, and the schools are the religion and philosophy of Masonry. You cannot get it plainer than that. So in other words, the Kabbalah is the religion of Masonry. But the Kabbalah is used in such a way that the people believe that what they believe is what's in the Bible. Masonry is a search after light. The search leads us directly back, as you can see, to the Kabbalah. In that ancient and little understood medley of absurdity and philosophy, the initiate will find the source of many doctrines. All truly dogmatic religions, that includes Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of them, have issued from the Kabbalah and return to it everything scientific and grand and the religious dreams of all the Illuminati, the ones that are illuminated. This is Luciferian language. Jacob Boehmer, Swedenborg, St. Martin and others is borrowed from the Kabbalah. All the Masonic associations owe to it their secrets and their symbols. Straightforward. There can be no doubt about these issues. The true Mason is therefore not creed-bound, cannot say he's a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. He realizes with the divine illumination of his lodge that as a Mason his religion must be universal. Christ, Buddha or Muhammad, the name means little, for he recognizes only the light and not the bearer. He worships at every shrine, bows before every altar, whether in the temple, mosque or cathedral, realizing with his truer understanding the oneness of all spiritual truth. That's Manly Palmer Hall, the lost keys of Freemasonry. Can you see where World Council of Churches could come in with something like this? Joining all the religions together? Does it start to make the little sound, a little ring a bell or whatever? Well, let's continue. 5 points of fellowship: foot to foot, knee to knee, breast to breast, hand to back, mouth to ear. These are identical to those used in the Druidic rite of witchcraft, and very similar to those used in other rites such as the Gardenian, Alexandrian rites. Now, Alexandria, that's where the occult knowledge was maintained. It was maintained in Alexandria and in Rome. Everything else in between was destroyed. We'll come to that a little later. There where Christianity flourished, it no longer exists. Islam exists there. And from Alexandria and later from Rome emanated the new religion. Passing a secret name or chant from mouth to ear is ancient magical practice reflected in the Hebrew word Kabbalah. So it's a secret religion. Now, why is the King James Bible on the altar? Masonry has nothing to do with the Bible. It is not founded upon the Bible, for if it were, it would not be Masonry, it would be something else. The Digest of Masonic Law, page 207 to 209. So it's not the Bible. The Bible is there as a what? as a symbol. But what about God and His Son Jesus Christ? Humanity in toto then is the only personal God. Here again we are talking about high Masons revealing their information. Humanity. Have you heard of the Humanist Manifesto and humanism in general? Right, this is a fascinating quote from Morals and Dogma. I read this entire book. It's the most heavy reading I've ever done in my life. I wouldn't suggest anybody reads it. It's such a pain in the neck, but nevertheless. The Bible is an indispensable part of the furniture of a Christian lodge. This isn't the original, this cursive. Only because it is the sacred book of the Christian religion. The Hebrew Pentateuch in a Hebrew lodge and the Quran in a Mohammedan one belong on the altar. And one of these, and the square and the compass, properly understood, are the great lights by which a Mason must walk and work. Okay, which one? Which one of the three is the great light? Well, you have three choices. It could be the Bible, it could be the Pentateuch, or it could be the Quran. I won't reveal it to you tonight, but it'll get clear which one it is. Masonry teaches that redemption and salvation are both the power and the responsibility of the individual Mason. Saviors like Hiram Abif, they have a ritual where they go through the raising of Hiram Abif, can and do show the way, but men must always follow and demonstrate each for himself his power to save himself. To build his own spiritual fabric in his own time and way, every man in essence is his own savior and redeemer, for he does not save, if he does not save himself, he will not be saved. All right, now it's getting a little bit clearer. Do we need Jesus Christ in all of this? Not really. The Masonic author Pearson admits the Masonic legend stands by itself, unsupported by history or other than its own traditions, yet we readily recognize in Hiram Abif, this is the one who is symbolically raised from the dead when a Mason in his ritual is called out of the coffin to rise up and receive new life. We recognize Osiris of the Egyptians, the Mithras of the Persian, the Bacchus of the Greek, Dionysius of the fraternity of the Artificers, and Attis of the Phrygians, whose passion, death, and resurrection were celebrated by these people respectively. So in other words, the ancient religion which counterfeited the religion of salvation in Jesus Christ is the religion of Masonry. So it's the old pagan religion which has another deity. Now how do we know if all of these have this, exactly the same ritual that Jesus went through? How do we know which one is right? The answer is the book of Daniel in chapters 8 and 9 give the precise time when the Messiah would be born and the circumstances. And that is why the Jews have placed a curse on anyone who numbers the 70 weeks, because then you would find out who the real Messiah is. So none of these could qualify for a Messiah because none of them had been predicted to the letter. So if we look at their symbolism, you will find it there. You will find the obelix, which is a symbol of the male organ of Osiris, which got lost when he was disseminated, and Isis put him together and built the missing piece. Well, let's not go into too much detail. Anyway, she did manage to get pregnant by it and give birth to Horus. So here we have the Egyptian. You will see here the Torah, the Ten Commandments. You'll see candlesticks, you'll see pyramids, you'll see Egyptian worship, you will see sun worship, all of it in their symbolism. Here is a ritual of the raising of Hiram Abif. Here is the book, The History of Freemasonry, and you'll notice the symbol over there at the top, the all-seeing eye, which is also the symbol of the Jesuits. Remember, in the previous lecture we showed that the Jesuit order created Freemasonry, wrote its rituals, and we gave all the quotes. Everything has been done. You can look it up in the previous lecture. So I'm not going to go into that detail. Here are some of the symbols that they use. And we can look at some of them. The symbols come to have two meanings. Remember, everything we're using here is a bona fide quote. The esoteric and the exoteric. The esoteric meaning was the true or original meaning understood only by a few and closely guarded by them. The exoteric meaning, that's for the goyim, for the cattle, for the stupid ones, the uninitiated, was the invented or modified explanation intended for the many. The sacred mysteries, which are often mentioned in connection with many ancient religions and which were closely guarded by the initiate, concerned esoteric meanings in the religions of previous times. These sacred mysteries were merely continuations of the simpler forms of the early sex worship carried on by a select few. Well, in the previous lecture we saw rituals going on where people today gather naked in forests, and that includes the presidents of the countries that rule the world today, and we saw that in the previous lecture. Nothing has changed. Are Masonic initiates misled? What about the poor Mason himself? Let's go to the best source in the world, Morals and Dogma, page 819. The blue degrees, that's the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry, are but the outer court of the portico of the temple. Part of the symbols are displayed there to the initiate, but he is, will you note this, intentionally misled by false interpretations. It is not intended that he shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them. No wonder they don't give this book to the lower initiates. That would freak them out, right? Their true explication is reserved for the adepts, the princes of Masonry. The whole body of the royal and sacerdotal art was hidden so carefully centuries since in the high degrees. There you have it. Only the high degrees know what is going on. This is the horse's mouth. Nobody can argue with that. I've had many Masons be very angry with me, but in the end they've had to admit this is the real McCoy. This is it. I know many, many Masons who've become good Christians as a consequence of these lectures. So they are important. There are many, many people that belong to the Masonic fraternity. Many, many people. Masonry, like all the religions, all the mysteries, Hermeticism and alchemy, conceals its secrets from all except the adepts and sages or the elect, and uses false explanations and misrepresentations of its symbols to mislead those who deserve only to be misled. Basically stupid. We're just using you to conceal the truth, which it calls light from them, and to draw them away from it. Truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it or would pervert it. So Masonry jealously conceals its secrets and intentionally leads conceited interpreters astray. Morals and Dogma, page 104, 105. There you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. Here's a high Mason book in Germany, and it tells us there exactly what they do. A Freemason, that's what stands there, formed out of the materials of his lodge, behold a master mason rare, whose mystic portrait does declare, the secrets of Freemasonry fair for all to read and see, but few there are to whom they're known, though they so plainly here are shown. So this is a language that you have to learn. They created this language because God confused the languages, so they created a language in symbolism that God would not be able to confuse in future. That's their logic. Now let's have a look at some of the symbols and see where we get. Crossed swords are part of the symbols, cornucopia, the horn of plenty. We have pentagrams and compasses and set squares, and G's, which they say stand for God, but actually stands for generative principle. It's the male organ, sorry, and the female one, because that's the only way you're going to generate. This stands for the masculine, this stands for the feminine. Now, if you go back into the other religions, if you go to China, for example, and you look at the sun god, so the equivalent, in other words, of Isis and Osiris, you will find that they are here. They are Fuxi and Nuwa, There they are on their cave drawings. Here they are. And you will note that Fuchsi and Noir carry the compass over there and the set square. They are symbols of the male and female deities. That's what it stands for. So the cathedrals of the world, this was just interesting. This one was being repaired, and of course, who would repair it? The company is Eich. But what does that tell us? What kind of company would it be? It's a Masonic company. Right, here you have the apron, and the apron has various symbols on it. You will see there the sun and the moon with the stars around it, and the compass and the set square. And of course, hidden in here, there is the mystic letter M. And that is the sigma on its side. But Masonry, of course, starts in every single language in the world. Masonry starts with an M. Well, we don't go through all the details. I just want you to recognize some of them. The keys are very prominent. You'll find them in the religious systems. Mystic towels are very prominent. Pigeons with olive leaves in their mouths, the Pith symbol. All of this symbolism comes from Masonry. And hammers and sickles are part of the symbolism of Freemasonry. You know where that occurred, don't you? And here you can set this set square either in the sickle form or in the other form, the all-seeing eye, of course, the pentagram and the pentagon, very prominent. These are occult symbols. Today we have whole buildings that are built like pentagons. You know that? And then you have, of course, the figure of the Johannsenite, the St. John, the so-called one, who's really a symbol of something else. And it has the X, and then it has the cross. What do you notice about that cross? It's an upside-down cross, symbol of victory over Jesus Christ. Now, we'll come to some other details about that in a moment. So hammers and sickles and upside-down crosses and G's and all kinds of interesting things, sun, moon, stars, all this symbolism. If you go to the tracing boards, first degree, second degree, and so forth, there's a vast amount of symbolism here. Sun, moon, and stars. If you intercalate those, then you get hexagrams, pentagrams. The star is in the east. To the uninitiated, he's informed that it is the Star of Bethlehem. But there's, of course, a problem if you just think logically. The Magi came from the east and they walked towards the star. So where was the Star of Bethlehem? It was in the west. So this is another one that was in the east. And the Bible condemns the praying towards the east, right? Because that represented the sun god. And this star in the east is none other star than Sirius, the brightest star in the heaven, the luminary. The illuminated one is the symbol of Lucifer. The brightest planet in the heavens is which one? Is Venus. Venus, it's called the morning star. In the morning star name, it is masculine. As Venus, it has a female deity name, it's female. So you have the male and the female connotation right there. The black and white squares represent knowledge of good and evil. Now man has become as one of us, knowing good and evil. And so we can continue right through all the symbolism. We don't have time to go into it all. The two pillars, Yachim and Boaz, supposedly the temple of Solomon's temple's pillars. But these are representations of the ziggurat of Babylon. Serpents encircling rings and globes and issuing from globes are common in the Persian, Egyptian, Chinese, and Indian monuments. Vishnu is represented reposing on a coiled serpent. So many of their symbolism refers to the ancient deities. The serpent with the tail in the mouth is the universal serpent, the life giver. The serpent is the symbol and prototype of the universal Savior, who redeems the world by giving creation the knowledge of itself and the realization of good and evil. Manly, Palmer Hall, 33 degree Freemason. So it is the serpent that gives you a knowledge of good and evil, and he is the one who is deified. You'll see skulls and babies representing life and death, cycles of life and death, reincarnation. It sees forwards and backwards. Often these are half white, half black, representing the knowledge of light and the knowledge of darkness. And whether you worship the dark side or whether you worship the light side doesn't really make any difference. That is why it is interesting that the light side worshippers are known as Luciferians, and the dark side are known as witches, wizards, and Satanists. And they are the best of friends because the deity is the same. It doesn't matter which vehicle you use to get to know him, it is the same deity. Cosmic keys, the answer to heaven and Hades. Pagan religious symbols are also very common in Freemasons: Athene, Earth, Ceres, Hermes, very common one that they use. All Jesuit cathedrals will have the symbol of Hermes. And of course, Masonry claims that it uses Hermetic rites. Hermes, son of Mes, son of Ham, if you like, from the very beginning. We haven't got time to go into all the details. So Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, all these symbols represent deities. Morals and Dogma, page 851, the 32nd degree, this is the highest degree. The hermaphroditic figure, there you have him, male, female, is the symbol of the double nature anciently assigned to the deity. Now remember that the Knights Templars also worshipped Baphomet, who was hermaphrodite, male, female. As generator and producer of Brahm and Maya and Osiris, whatever, we don't have to go into all the details. So if we go through Scottish Rite Masonry, the 33rd degree is known as Sovereign Grand Inspector General. It's an honorary degree for the highest Masons, and you have to be a high initiate to get into that. And then you get down Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret is the 32nd, and you go all the way down, 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 until you get down here to the blue degrees, which are Entered Apprentice, Fellowcraft, and Master Mason. And you can go up all the way almost to the top and never know what you're doing. Never know what you're actually involved in. There's a youth group in Freemasonry which is called Demolay. Isn't that fascinating? That is the man who was sentenced to death for spitting on the cross and for committing sodomy and the most profane things under the sun, but that's the youth group. Isn't that interesting that Billy Graham said that the Demolays are the elite of the youth in the world? Fascinating statement. Knights Columbus, we've seen them with their fasciae, we'll come to that in a later lecture again, which control the world political system, at least in the United States. And the head of a lodge gets to the position of worshipful master. The Bible says you must call nobody master, let alone worshipful master. This violates the first commandment. The headquarters of the Supreme Council of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Southern Jurisdiction, USA. This is what you have on the front. You have the sphinxes with the serpents on the sides. And this is known as the House of the Temple on the east side of Northwest 16th Street between R&S Street in Washington, D.C. This is where the high Masons meet. The entire cabinet of the USA will meet there. Whether they are Democrat or Republican makes no difference. That is where the decisions are made. This is a book called The Deadly Deception, written by a man, James D. Shaw, who was initiated into the highest degree, the 33rd degree, and later rescinded and left it. 33rd degree initiation ceremony. The oath is sealed by drinking wine out of a human skull. May this wine I now drink become a deadly poison to me, as the hemlock juice drunk by Socrates, should I ever knowingly or willfully violate the same. A member dressed as a skeleton places his arms round the candidate, who then states, "And may these cold arms forever encircle me, should I ever knowingly or willfully violate the same." Here are some of the symbols of Freemasonry. These are the so-called secret symbols. If you look at them, you'll find some of them are very interesting. We're not going to go into all of them. Let's enlarge some of them. If you thought that had something to do with Volkswagen, I suggest you think again. Those are the two V's, one inside the other, representing the union of the two deities. And if you thought that was the heart of the Union Jack, then you will know now that the Union Jack means that Great Britain is a Masonically controlled country. So is its religion, as we will see. These are all symbols of, this is Aquarius, for example. if you thought that was the Star of David, then ask yourself why before Masonry was around, there was no Star of David. And these symbols over here, of course, very, very prominent. We haven't got time to go into all of these. We're just opening it up. So if you find ecstasy and mandrax tablets being distributed amongst the youth, they will have all these symbols on them. You thought that was Mitsubishi symbol? Well, they would be very upset if you thought that they helped to propagate mandrax and ecstasy and the like. And there you have this symbol, this VW symbol, this W that is two V's locked inside each other. Now, these are occult symbols. In other words, these drugs are being dispensed by an organization that uses the symbols of its religion. And if you thought that this papal choir was sponsored by Volkswagen, you had better think again. That symbol means something else on these innocent little children that are bearing Luciferian symbols. Here is Aleister Crowley's symbolism. You'll see it's very similar. We'll have the pentagram and all the other symbols over there. The G, you will notice that that is basically the basic structure, and you can fill it in, and then you can have a pentagram. You can have it that way around, or you could have it the other way around, depending on which you want it. That would be the goat of Mendes. That would be the dark side. Also, unfortunately, sorry ladies, the female side. And that would be the male representation. Let's ask the Dictionary of Mysticism to tell us what this means. The pentagram is considered by occultists to be the most potent means of conjuring spirits. When a single point of the star points upward, it is regarded as the sign of the good, and it means to conjure benevolent spirits. When a single point points down and a pair of points are on the top, it is the sign of the evil, Satan, and is used to conjure up powers of evil. That's what it says. It's interesting that this symbol is, of course, used everywhere in the world, including most of the flags. Let's ask another source, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. You won't get a better source than that. Freemasons of the United States have by tacit consent referred to it, the pentagram, as a symbol of the 5 points of fellowship. So it's the Pentaphora of Pythagoras, the science of the Magi. The Pentaphora is called the holy and mysterious pentagram. It's the star of the magicians. So this is occultism. You've got it all over your flags. Very interesting. Double triangles and so forth. You have male, female, good, evil, Adam, Kadmon, all these symbols, a divine man, and now we get to the point where we start revealing what they actually mean. And may God help us as we continue along this road and find out what the hidden agenda of this Freemasonry actually is. We are now going into the actual teaching of Freemasonry. We've just looked at the basic framework. Notice this statement: it is far more important that men should strive to become Christs than that they should believe that Jesus was Christ. That's pretty straightforward. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, this particular one, this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, New York Image Books, 1995, page 129, says the following: "For the Son of God became man so that we might become gods. The only begotten Son of God, wanting to make us sharers in his divinity, assumed our nature so that he, made man, might make men gods. Marvel and rejoice, we have become Christ." Now, not all public catechisms will have this, so don't look for it in your general catechism. It's that edition which says it. Because there's an inner teaching and an outer teaching. Don't forget that. Manly Palmer Hall, 33-degree Freemason, says man is God in the making. Hinduism teaches this, that through your various incarnations, and Buddhism teaches it, that eventually through nirvana you become one with the divine, you are divine. Another Masonic writer writes, "Be still and know that I am God, the final recognition of the all in all, the unity of the self with the cosmos, the cognition of the divinity of the self. So this is the opposite of what the Bible teaches in the beginning. Sin would lead to death, but the serpent said, you will surely not die, you shall be like gods. So this is serpent language, this is not God language, this is Lucifer's teaching, this is not God's teaching. The perfect man is Christ, and Christ is God. This is the birthright and destiny of every human soul. J.D. Buck, Mystic Masonry. Notice the symbolism again. You could get the hexagram out of it, and you could get that sign out of it. You can turn it around and put it in front of a car as well if you like. A triangle with a point down represents the deity and is called the deity's triangle or the master triangle. With a point up it is called the earthly triangle, pyramid triangle, or the fire triangle, and this emblem symbolizes the perfect or divine man. So when a religion uses these triangles, in Kabbalism they are saying we are divine. So the Star of David is a in-your-face God, we are divine. That's a terrible statement I'm making here tonight. That's a terrible statement. With a point upwards, the equatorial triangle stands for Shiva, the destroyer, and signifies the flame which rises upward from the funeral pyre towards heaven. The symbol is familiar to us, the Masons, in several degrees, notably the 30th degree. Notice the higher degrees get initiated into what is going on. This is Ward, Freemasonry, and the ancient gods. So Shiva is the god who is there represented. We'll come to that in a moment. So when you see a symbol like this, it's not as simple as it sounds. This is Kilbourne Platt, showing that Ohio, historical markers, these states are all dedicated Masonically. The double-headed eagle we've dealt with already. The 32nd degree makes the double-headed eagle its particular emblem, and of course also of the 33rd degree. In this sign we conquer is what it says over here. The Maltese cross, also the crown with the cross in it, are Masonic symbols, and you will find it is the symbol of many churches, particularly Pentecostal churches. Then you have various co-masonry degrees. For example, this is the symbol used by the Order of the Eastern Star, which is female Freemasonry, which is of course run by male Freemasonry. Freemasonry generally is a white brotherhood, but co-masonry accommodates females and black people. So to the uninitiate, it seems as if the white race is supreme. Once you get to the higher initiates, there is a different story, and Nimrod was worshipped as black or white. There is chaos created between the races, so you have the Ku Klux Klan, which is anti-black, and you have organizations which are equally anti-white. This is called dialectic thinking. Remember the Hegelian principle? You create friction between the races so that you can have synthesis in the end and bring about a new world order. So in order to unite the races, the best thing to do is to create chaos amongst the races until the pain of separation exceeds the pain of unity. You understand the Hegelian dialectic thinking? It's brilliant. It's sick, but it's brilliant. And it doesn't matter if you sacrifice hundreds of thousands of lives to achieve your objective, because the end justifies the means. It really is a terrible doctrine. So if we go to co-masonry, this is the symbol of co-masonry. Are the symbols, words, and other Masonic expressions also found within the occult? Yes, they are. They are also used in the Golden Dawn and other societies. As we say, here is the Order of the Eastern Star. Here is their main center, the international headquarters, also known as the International Temple. That is where it is, in Washington, D.C. And this is Prince Hall Freemasonry. This is black Freemasonry. And very often the Masons themselves do not know about all these sub-organizations. So if you go up the ranks of Prince Hall Freemasonry, Then you will find Knights Templars up there, for example. Knight Templar, well, that tells you something, right? So they really use these names. This is their own page, so this is not something that has been thought up. And the very, very highest individuals in the black world, for example, are Prince Hall Freemasons. Might I mention a name, Nelson Mandela, if you're interested? This is what they look like. So there's no such thing as it just being a white brotherhood, although each one of the groups is individually often non-informed. This is the levels. These are the levels in Freemasonry, and we can fill them in. The actual levels vary according to the source. This one here is as it was revealed by Ayn Rand, who was the girlfriend of Philip Rothschild. She committed suicide. Humanism is the lowest level. Masons, no aprons. The YMCA, the whole Scout movement out there, etc., forms part of Masonic organizations. Rotary, the Lions, the Oddfellows, well, you have them right next door. The Lions, of course, use the two-headed lion, the Tsianus, the two-headed one, all those symbols. And these are all good organizations that appear to do very good things. Blue Masons, that's John's Masons. There you have the name John again. Get very nervous when you hear it. York Rite, Scottish Rite, Communism, B'nai B'rith, Jewish Masonry, Council of 500, Council of 33, Council of 500, also known as the Bilderbergers, if you like, the Council of 13. And at the highest level, we saw that the papacy is involved because the Jesuits control all of them, every single level. Here is the Pope in front of the Boy Scout movement, and this is the feeder organization into other organizations. And none of them know anything about it, so don't accuse them, but have a look at some of their symbolism and see if you find the Masonic symbolism there. You'll find it. Female Masons that were very prominent, of course, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, Annie Besant, Alice A. Bailey, and Alice A. Bailey, her husband, was Foster. He was a 32-degree Freemason and part of co-masonry. They started a publishing company known as Lucifer Trust, which they later changed to Lucis Trust. This is Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. This one over here is Alice A. Bailey. And these are the ones who wrote down the secret of the secret doctrines. Of course, once they achieved the highest degrees, then they would have to be male. So Annie Besant is known as Brother Annie Besant, 33-degree Freemason. The same in the Egyptians. If a female pharaoh became pharaoh, then she was male. So Hatshepsut, for example, is figured with a beard, because you had to be an honorary male. You can't be the reincarnation of the sun god if you're a female. So co-masonry, Annie Besant and all these high masons, Alice A. Bailey, high priestess of the New Age movement, received messages from a Tibetan known as Dwal Kul. On her writings you will find, of course, the Masonic symbols. And these are her writings. And of course, Blavatsky is the one who wrote Isis Unveiled, Secret Doctrine, and all of these mystic Masonic books, which are virtually impossible to get hold of, although these days you can, if you search, find them. Let me take you to one of the largest lodges in the world, which has become a museum. This one is in Guthrie, in Oklahoma. We'll go inside. You will see swastikas. They will say they are the other way around. Yes, that might be so, but that doesn't mean anything, because the one way around it represents the female aspect, and the other way around it represents the male aspect, so it doesn't make any difference. You will find the symbol of the sun god Ra. You'll find the all-seeing eyes, and then you'll see this statue. It can be male, it can be female, it makes no difference. You should figure that out by now. With the finger on the mouth. And they will tell you that means secrecy. Don't reveal the secrecies, or quiet in the lodge. All kinds of nonsense they will tell you. It's got nothing to do with it. This is only for the initiate to know what this is. This is the symbol of Horus, and I'll show it to you in a moment. On the floor, you have the various pentagrams in this form over here, and the pentagons. And in front of this statue it says, all who stand here stand facing the east. Let each review his obligation and renew them in his heart. So this worship is towards the east, which the Bible forbade. Now there's the god Horus. You will notice that he's always depicted with his finger on his mouth. His religion is for the initiate. These are the dress of the various Masonic levels. The Sovereign Grand Commander has this symbol on the front, and there you have it on Sovereign Grand Commander Henry Clausen. That it is. That's the symbol of Baphomet. That's Baphomet, the androgenic god, and you will be surprised where Baphomet features these days. I will be showing it to you in future lectures. And of course, it's also on the building over here, which is the headquarters of the Mother Supreme Council of the world, Washington, D.C., where the Constitution for the New World Order has already been written, right there. That's Baphomet, and this is how the symbolism was also used by Alice A. Crowley. In the lodge, you will find IHS. I showed you that was the symbolism for the Jesuit order, Isis, Horus, Set. This stained glass window, in the light, it is, in the day, it is white. In the night, it becomes black, a very special technique. And if you know that Osiris was worshipped as black or white, then that explains the story. They have an Egyptian room with all the symbolism that goes along with it. They have an Assyrian room because they represent all the ancient religions. Here is a statue of Albert Pike. It's called the Albert Pike Lodge, number 162. To study and seek to interpret correctly the symbols of the universe is the work of the sage and the philosopher. It is to decipher the writing of God. Albert Pike. Now here is his book, Morals and Dogma. I've scanned this in so that people don't say I'm talking hearsay. They must know I have the book. And whatever is quoted over here comes directly from him. In the Scottish Rite, the crown and scepter symbolize a man's dominion over himself. We are God. We don't need anyone else to tell us what to do. The history of man's thought is the only history worth much study. Don't worry about the other one. There's the library. I just photographed it to show you that the history of Freemasonry and the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry are genuine books. The New Age magazine has been replaced by Scottish Rite magazine. There's also the symbol over there that we spoke about earlier. And it is to himself alone that man can find enduring happiness. We are our own savior. Again, in this lodge, you will have Jacques de Molay honored. Rosicrucianism, the cross on the rose. The one who really suffered was Osiris, not Jesus Christ. And there you have the mystic Tao and other symbolism like the lion with eagle wings, symbol of Babylon. And here you have the double-headed eagle in its original black-white form representing the two deities. This is the cornucopia. What does it stand for? It is the symbol of many political organizations. It was the symbol of the organization that expanded and used apartheid. It was the symbol of the National Party in Southern Africa. It's interesting. So, what were they? Let's ask what the cornucopia means. The cornucopia, or horn of plenty, was double-sexed in symbolism. The horn was masculine and the inside was feminine. The fruit inside symbolized productiveness of the female. It's a sex symbol, again, the union of Isis and Osiris. So when we look at these deities, remember that's Horus, Isis. She's the one who stands on the serpent. Mary is the one who stands in Catholicism on the serpent. Dionysius as a child is just the same thing. These gods came in the hexagram, in the hexagon, etc. They came in the square. This is the god Harpocrates, or if you like, Horus. There he has the cornucopia in his hand, and the finger is broken off. That points to the mouth, as per usual. Here's another Masonic lodge. Inside, you'll have the same symbolism. You'll have yin-yang signs up against the ceilings. This is the blue room. And there are only 3 lights in a lodge, because the north is the place of darkness. Now, if you know your Bibles, you will know that the north is where the throne of God is. That's the source of darkness. Something's upside down. And the various rooms used by the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, etc., 2 pillars always representing Joachim and Boaz. On top of it, you'll see the signs of the zodiac. There they are. This shows you what this is. Astrology is a science demanding respect of the scholar, notwithstanding its designation as a black art. And in a reflective sense and an occult science, this science was known to the ancients as the divine art, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. So astrology is uplifted by Freemasonry, although the Bible parliaments of the world, the symbolisms. This one is very prominent, and you will see many organizations use it. Sports people use it. Why? Because the sports companies and the sports superstructures are all Masonically controlled. And some of the hand signals, we're not going to go into that. We're going to stick to quotes. Now let's ask them directly. We've seen it in symbolism. We've seen it suggested. You can figure it out if you're really interested, but most people don't actually get there. So let's ask at the higher degree level, tell us directly, who do you worship? Who is the God of Masonry? Eliphas Levi, Mystery of Magic. What is more absurd and more impious than to attribute the name Lucifer to the devil? That is, to personified evil. The intellectual Lucifer is the spirit of intelligence and love. It is the Paraklete, the advocate. Isn't that interesting? It is the Holy Spirit, where the physical Lucifer is the great angel of universal magnetism. So Lucifer is the Holy Spirit, Lucifer is the Parakletos. He is the advocate. The Bible says we have one advocate, and that is Christ Jesus. Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the Word, the serpent, the Savior. This is a secret doctrine by Elena Petrovna Blavatsky, pages 171, 225, 255, volume 2. I have them at home. If you don't want to believe me, I can send you a photocopy. It is Satan who is the God of our planet and the only God. These are pretty direct quotes. You won't get around them. Let's go to Albert Pike directly. 30-degree Freemason. Lucifer is the light bearer. Strange and mysterious name to give to the spirit of darkness. Lucifer, the son of the morning. Is it he who bears the light, and with its splendor intolerable blinds feeble, sensual, or selfish souls? Doubt it not. So who's the God of Freemasonry? Lucifer. Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. The devil is the personification of atheism or idolatry. For the initiate, it's not a person but a force. Do you know a movie where they say the force be with you? I know a movie like that. The Bible says, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light, 2 Corinthians. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. This is the instruction to the 23 Supreme Councils of the world, given in 1889, and it reads as follows. Albert Pike, the head of Scottish Freemasonry and the founder of that Bible of Freemasonry. That which we must say to a crowd is, we worship a God, but it is the God one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, take note of this quote. I'm going to go a bit slower here. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, we say this, that you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degree. Notice it says may. It doesn't mean that they do. it means you may. 32nd, 31st, and 30th degree. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, be maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, that's the other one, that's Jesus if you like, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of man. He brought the flood, he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, that lovely, peace-loving, old-time San Francisco, he just destroyed it. Can you believe that? And his priests culminate him. Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is also God. Because light cannot exist without darkness, blah, 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 blah. So, question. At which level should a Mason know who he's worshipping? The 30th, the 31st, the 32nd, and the 33rd degree. A 33-degree Freemason will know who he worships, yes or no? Is that clear? Okay? Now what if I could show you who the 33-degree Freemasons of this world are? Would that change your opinion from one, wow, what a wonderful achievement, to, oops, there's something wrong here, yes or no? Do you think that is important? What if you were to find out that the greatest preachers in the world are 33-degree Freemasons? How would you react? How would you react if you found out that the politicians of the world are 33-degree Freemasons, the highest politicians in the world? How would you react? Would it change your perception somewhat? The true name of Satan, the Kabbalists say, is Yahweh reversed. For Satan is not a black god, but the negation of God. For the initiates, it's not a person, but a force. Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma, page 102. To conceive of God, the Kabbalah imagined him to be a most occult light. Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma, page 740. Here is a conjugation addressed to Emperor Lucifer. Emperor Lucifer, master and prince of the rebellious spirits, I adjure thee to leave thine abode, and whatever quarter of the world it may be situated, and come hither to communicate with me. When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mastery of his craft, the seething energy of Lucifer in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy. He must follow in the footsteps of his forefathers, Tubal-Cain, that's an interesting name, we haven't got time to go into all those details, who with the mighty strength of the war god hammered his sword into a plowshare. So you first create war and chaos so that people will be willing to give it up and join into one giant Luciferian empire. Do you know what irritated the devil most? When God separated the nations. That was a headache to him. It gave him 4,500 years of headache. He's been battling for 4,500 years to get his act together again. He's got his act together. The devil is now called darkness by the church. Notice too, this is a quote from Blavatsky. You cannot get better sources than this. This is Secret Doctrine, page 71. The devil is now called darkness by the church, whereas in the Bible he is called the Son of God, the bright star of the early morning, Lucifer. See Isaiah. Oh, they turn everything upside down. I'll show you why in a moment. There's a whole philosophy of dogmatic craft in the reason why the first archangel who sprang from the depths of chaos was called Lux, Lucifer, the luminous son of the morning, or man-vantric dawn. He was transformed by the church into Lucifer or Satan because he is higher and older than Jehovah and had to be sacrificed to the new dogma. So, what the uninitiate gets is the doctrine of the Bible washed down, and the initiate turns it upside down. The devil is the true God, and Jehovah, Yahweh, is the bad guy. Well, let's see if we can back it up. Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, page 73. Jehovah, esoterically as Elohim, is also the serpent or dragon that tempted Eve, and the dragon is an old glyph or astral light primordial principle, which is the wisdom of chaos. Okay. So the devil is the wisdom of chaos, but the real bad guy was who? Jehovah. So the Bible is turned upside down. Now Jehovah tempted Eve and not the serpent. Blavatsky, Secret Doctrine, Volume 2. The philosophical system of the Gnostics and the primitive Jewish Christians, the Nazarenes and the Ebionites are fully considered. They show the view held in these days outside the circle of Mosaic Jews about Jehovah. He was identified by all the Gnostics with evil. So the Gnostics believe that Jehovah is the bad one, Lucifer is the good one. They are Luciferians. Secret Doctrine, Volume 1. The great serpent of the Garden of Eden and the Lord God are identical. So God is the serpent, he's the bad guy. Turn it around. And so are Jehovah and Cain one, the Cain who is referred to in theology as the murderer and the liar to God. So who's the murderer and the liar now? Jesus is the murderer and the liar, and the serpent is the good guy. Well, Secret Doctrine, Volume 2, page 388. The appellation Satan, Hebrew Satan, an adversary, from the word Satana, to be adverse, belongs by right to the first and cruelest adversary of all the other gods, Jehovah, not to the serpent, which spoke only words of sympathy and wisdom, and is at the worst, even in the dogma, the adversary of men. This is serious stuff. Therefore, Jehovah was called by the Gnostics the creator of and one of the ophinomorphs, the serpent, Satan, or evil. Another one, we could go on and on and on and on. She calls him a Jehovah Frankenstein. That's not very nice, wouldn't you say so? Calling my God Frankenstein? The Kabbalists say that the true name of Satan is Jehovah placed upside down. I'll tell you something in the Islamic lecture which will really excite you. Satan is not a black god, but the negation of the white deity. Now, black and white has got nothing to do with skin color here. It has to do with illumination. And so we could go on. I'm going to show you something else that's interesting here. Jehovah, even the insider knows this. Jehovah becomes Satan and Michael and his army. Satan and the rebellious angels. So Michael, which means the one who is what God is Satan and his angels. And Lucifer and his angels, he's setting up his kingdom down here. My Bible says Michael is the prince that stands for your people, and he will stand up and come and sort the evil one out, right or wrong. So we've turned the doctrine upside down. Michael being simply Jehovah himself, one of the subordinate spirits at best. They hate Jesus Christ. Just like the Templars, they spit on the cross. Now, if you do not believe the Blavatsky source, let's go to Morals and Dogma, the Masonic source. The deity of the Old Testament is everywhere represented as the direct author of evil. There he says exactly the same thing. I don't have to repeat it. Let's carry on. So little have the first Christians who despoiled the Jews of the Bible understood the first 4 chapters of Genesis in their esoteric meaning. Now let's go into this. That they never perceived that not only was no sin intended in the disobedience, but actually the serpent was the Lord God. Himself, who was, as the Ophos, the Logos, the bearer of divine creative wisdom, taught mankind to become creators in their turn. The serpent was so good to you. You would be still stupid if it wasn't for the serpent. The devil is now called darkness by the church, but the Bible calls him the Son of God. Remember that one? So no wonder Manly Palmer Hall, 33-degree Freemason, says, I hereby promise the great spirit Lucifuge, prince of the demons, that each year I will bring unto him a human soul to do with as it may please him. Do you think they might still have human sacrifices? And in return, Lucifuge promises to bestow upon me the treasures of the earth and to fulfill my every desire for the length of my natural life. Manly Palmer Hall, you can have it. I prefer Jesus Christ and eternal life. Official logo of Ordo Templar Orientis. We don't have to go into all these details. Who then is allowed to know the truth about Masonry? We must create a super rite, now notice carefully, which will remain unknown, to which we will call those Masons of high degrees, 30 and above, whom we shall select. With regards to our brothers in Masonry, these men must be pledged to the strictest secrecy. Through this supreme right, we will govern all Freemasonry, which will become the one international center, the more powerful, because its direction will be unknown. This was a letter from Pike to the head of the Order of the Illuminati, Giuseppe Mazzini. So, who governs the world? A super right. George Bush calls them 1,000 points of light, illuminated ones. They don't use this terminology for nothing. They were going to create 3 world wars. Here's the quote. I'm not going to go into details on this quote right now. There's a lecture coming up, Revolutions, Dictators and Wars. We'll look at it then. Scary stuff. Ordo ab chaos is their statement. That means order out of chaos. The symbol they use for that is the phoenix rising from the ashes. Out of the destruction of what God has put onto this planet, Satan will create his diabolical kingdom where all nations, all religions will become one. Because that's the only way he can have universal rulership. Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Jesus says, come out and be separate. They say, come in and be inclusive or else. Wow, it's getting interesting. There's another lecture coming up. Don't miss any of these. This is amazing stuff. If you think that some have said to me, Ordo ab chaos is not a Masonic statement. I said, excuse me, I've been in the lodge and photographed their documents. There it is. Ordo ab chaos. And if you want to know how we got in there, we just walked in. And there are witnesses at the back that we didn't do this clandestinely. I just went in and I photographed it while my wife was talking to someone and keeping them busy. There it is. Ordo ab chaos. This is the main lodge in England. That's the main building. Now, I wasn't allowed to take any photographs inside. You can go into the first portions. You couldn't go into the others. But I showed you what it looks like in one of the other lodges anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. Notice that the north is the place of Masonic darkness. The east is where the worshipful master sits, representing this androgenic principle. The south is where the junior warden sits. The west is where the senior warden sits. Then there is an altar, and there are 3 Masonic lights. These are the symbols that you will find on the Masonic lodge: the compass, the set square, the triangles, the all-seeing eye, all of these. And the all-seeing eye, let's ask the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry what it stands for. So when you see it on the dollar, ask the horse's mouth. They put it there. The all-seeing eye is an all-important symbol of the Supreme Being borrowed by the Freemasons from the nations of antiquity. On the same principle, the Egyptians represented Osiris, their chief deity, by the symbol of an open eye, and placed the hieroglyphic of him in all their temples. If it's the right eye, it's masculine. If it's the left eye, it's female. Doesn't really matter which one it is. You have Isis and Osiris. That's their own source. So that's what it means on the dollar, and it means nothing else. It's the symbol that the Jesuits claim as their main symbol. So all of these symbols have an esoteric and an exoteric meaning. Now, what does that represent? That's the Tower of Babel, correct. Now, as we said, Babel was an attempt to unite all people in apostasy to God. And what did God do? He confounded the languages and gave us another 4,500 years for souls to accept him and be saved. What a generous, kind God we have. If it wasn't for that action which has confounded one word of God, just one word, imagine this, one word, and the devil had 4,500 years of work. How strong is he really? I don't think he has any strength compared to God whatsoever. He's a liar and he's been a liar from the beginning. And he could not do what he wanted to do because God gave his word, and the word was spread abroad. But the serpent, out of the bottomless pit, was going to make war on the word. Don't forget that. We're going to look tomorrow and the day thereafter what he did. Wow, unbelievable. So, here is the Tower of Babel. This comes from a Masonic source. Above there is the all-seeing eye, and here they are measuring and building. It's interesting that one of the highest politicians in France said, just recently, when they put a poster across the whole of Europe of the temple of the Tower of Babel with a crane on it under construction, he said, "We are building a new Babel, and this time we will succeed." Well, we'll see. Well, let's ask the High Freemasons, Arthur Edward Waite, who wrote the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, by the way, he should know what it means. Arthur Edward Waite, as regards Masonry, Babel, of course, represented a Masonic enterprise. It is well known that the Tower of Babel was one of the most ancient traditions of Masonry. There you have it. I have said nothing tonight, please note. Every single statement I have made has been substantiated from their own highest sources. So please don't say that I am presenting things here which are divisive. If you are angry, get in contact with them, not with me. I didn't say it, they said it. Every single statement. In the Masonic quiz book, the question is asked, who was Nimrod? The answer is, he was the son of Cush, in the old constitutions referred to as one of the founders of Masonry. I thought he was a warrior before the Lord, against the Lord. And in the scriptures as the architect of many cities, in the York manuscript we find, at the making of the Tower of Babel there was masonry first much esteemed of, and Nimrod was a mason himself and loved well masons. So a mason is nothing other than a harborer of the occult knowledge, clothing themselves with all their good deeds and their many, many members who they use maliciously and lie to so that they might appear noble. These people are wicked at the highest level. Masonic author Kenneth A. Mackenzie tells us that Hermes was also one of the founders of Masonry. Hermes. They used the words like this, like Rameses, for example, son of Ra, Rames. Mes means son of her ham, if you like. Elena Petrovna Blavatsky links Hermes and Satan together. So you have to piece the puzzle together. It's very tricky to find out what Masonry teaches. You have to go from one source to another because no one author will tell you everything. So let's piece it together. So the one author says Hermes is the one that's important to them. Blavatsky says Hermes is the god of wisdom called Tot, Tat, Set, Satan. And that he was furthermore, when viewed under his bad aspect, Typhon of the Egyptians, Satan, who was also Set. So when they say they have Set, that's Satan. If they say Hermes, that's Satan in his Luciferian form. Doesn't matter. Could be male, female, who cares? One or the other. Arthur Edward Waite writes, in regard to Masonry, Babel, of course, represented a Masonic enterprise, and the early expositors reaped full benefit from that fact. They remembered that the people who were of one language and one speech journeyed from the east to the west like those who have tried and proved as master masons. When they reached an abiding place in the land of Shinar, it affirmed that they dwelt therein as Noachidai, being first characteristic name of masons. It was here that they built the high tower of confusion. Out of evil comes good. Aha! So God was evil when he confused the languages, but they will turn it back to good. Have you got that? And the way to achieve that is to rub them up in chaos, destroy them, use them as gun fodder, kill them, do whatever you like, make the pain of separation so great that you will beg for unity. Have you all got that? Now, who are these? No, that's another lecture. I mustn't digress. It was here that they built the high tower of confusion. Out of evil comes good. However, and the confusions of tongues gave rise to the ancient practice of masons conversing without the use of speech. So if you're going to confuse us with languages, we'll use symbols. So symbolism is a Masonic language. Today, people tell me, but the symbols are everywhere. Hello, what does that tell you? Who's in control? Everywhere. The Druids of Britain and Gaul had a deep knowledge concerning the mysteries of Isis and worshipped her under the symbol of the moon. The moon was chosen for Isis because of its domination over water. The Druids considered the sun to be father and moon, the mother of all things. See to teachings of the ages. So the Druids are the ones who control Great Britain. Winston Churchill belonged to the Druidic order of Freemasonry, and he was a 33-degree Freemason. And I photographed his apron, in case someone doesn't believe that. And so we start finding little tidbits of history that make sense. As you enter the lodge in England, you have to cross the pentagram. And if you look up, you have this statue at the top. It's a shield, and there's a chevron over there. Do you see it? Let's make it a little bit bigger. There it is. Chevron, chevron, chevron. Do you find it on some cars, maybe? Just for interest's sake. And then, of course, you have other symbolism over here, and you have even the Ark of the Covenant, because he wants to be like the Most High, but his covering cherubs have got what kind of feet? Goat's feet. This is Satanism. That's why in Masonry you ride the goats. There are many jokes about riding the goats. There are many fun postcards. They make fun of it. They have the goat singing hymns. They have the goat doing this, riding the goat, this and that. It's a symbol of Lucifer. We'll see later that they say goats go to heaven, sheep go to hell. Interesting. The Bible says in Ephesians 5:8-14, "For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them." I think we did that tonight. I don't want anything to do with it, but to expose it is necessary. For it is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, for it is light that makes everything visible. What a beautiful word of God we have. No hidden agendas. Jesus says, "I have done nothing in secret." I love the God of the Bible. And the mere fact that I am still alive shows that God is almighty. What a wonderful God we serve. What a kind God we serve. I would not want to give up serving him for all the satanic wealth of this world. What does it mean? It means nothing. Jesus is coming soon, and the kingdom of darkness will have had his shot, and it will walk over the blood-stained earth that it has marauded and tortured for the centuries and centuries in wars and battles. But the Word of God has remained through all that time. The Word of God stands like a rock, the last thing that stands in his way. What a...
All right, okay. All right, fam. Hope you get something out of that. Okay? Remember, I've said that already. You got to piece these things out. You got to piece them out. But, they're all connected, man. They're like each religion, the major ones. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Bible, the supposedly Pentateuch, which I think is a Talmud, but whatever, and or the Quran. Just pick and choose. But remember, they keep calling this particular organization as universal. So you got to think about exactly what that means. If there's anything or any vessel that would bring the so-called one world religion, it would be this one, I think, because of their universal concept. But anyhow, man, other than that, I hope you guys do well today. You guys enjoy the rest of the night. Appreciate you being here. Let's see what else. I did get the picture. Oh, that's right. I did get the picture. Hold on a second. I did get the picture. My bad. I almost forgot. So the brother sent me this here. And you can see what they're talking about, the triangle facing the east. This is north, south, west, east. You know, pentagrams, tetragrammatons, alpha, omega. That's why with some particular books, you hear an individual calling to himself the alpha and omega for that purpose. See, that's why it's just weird, man. And then when you read this, it says Michael, right? But then it's alchemy. If you read it backwards, alchemy or Mikael, right? Or because I don't know any other way to Michael, but if you read it backwards again, it's alchemy. Primemution or primation, tetragrammaton, anaphexton, some crap like that. But anyhow, with all that being said, man, hope you guys do well. I'm gonna have a good topic coming up. You know what I'm saying? So again, these are just videos. You know, this is just videos, man. These are just videos. You know what I'm saying? Let me see what you said. It doesn't matter. We're all Hebrews. We're going to fall. Every single one of us is going to fall. Only 144 is going to make it, just like 8 people made it to know. Well, I mean, if you already counted yourself out, then I guess you're out already. Don't include me in your statement, bro. You know what I'm saying? And if you feel like you're falling, then that's on you. I'm not claiming to be any one of those people, but it sure as hell, I'm not going to be wishing for that. Like, hey, everybody's going to fall. Might as well give the fuck up, because that's what it sounds like to me. That's not what I'm doing this for. Don't think and believe all of a sudden, I'm just going to go and enjoy my life because none of it is real. Fuck that. That's bullshit. That's not true either. But anyhow, that's my opinion. You know, everybody has their own. Don't be a lightweight, people. You know what I'm saying? We're adults here. I think we should be clear with exactly what we are learning about. I got something. Some brother been putting some music. I don't know if he knows these people or if he does it himself. But it was good stuff, man. You guys enjoy the song, all right? I like it. Have a good night.
Snatch the mic from conquistadors' descendants. Resurrect ancestors in every sentence. You built your cathedrals on our bones and our essence. But I'm the vengeance encoded in every lesson. I'm obsidian tongue, now well in the rhythm. My syllables slice like Quetzal plumes in prism. I'm the algorithm of forgotten prisms. The DNA of kingdoms pre-Christian. You call me a legal alien, I call that fiction. A label invented after linguistic crucifixion. They baptized our vision, erased tradition. But I'm the codex risen. Glyphs and transmissions, apotech, mathematics, mixed stack, manuscripts, striking linguistics encrypted in hieroglyph scripts. I spit solar flares, old mech in the syntax. Before your prophets ever dreamed of sin acts. I'm the son of maize, not the son of Spain. Blood of volcanoes pulsing through my veins. Colonial trauma encoded in my brain, but I broke those chains. Jaguar untamed, they say mestizo, like it's a downgrade, but I'm the upgrade. 2,000 years on upgrade. Before Adam, before Rome, before crusades, we had calendars calculating cosmic waves. You burn our codices cold as pagans, but our science was quantum equations. We mapped Orion with obsidian tools. You map crusades with blood and fools. I'm not with what tongue think a stone with Sarika prayer. My timekeeper, celestial layer. Chicanos not slang. It's reclamation of decolonized nation within a nation. From Alaska to Andes, I see reflections. Cherokee, Maya, Mapuche connections. I'm the fusion of feathers and fire direction. The smoke of incense, rebellion's complexion. They call me Latino, nah, that's oppression. They call me Hispanic, that's possession. You can't colonize what's eternal. I'm internal, infernal, ancestral journal. The Taino's conch still echoes through wind. The Keek still chant what's never been dimmed. The Aymara still guard the sacred rim. We are not myths, we are oxygen. I'm the voice of the Pueblos who forgot to name. The prophecy fulfilled in the hip-hop flame. This is not rap, it's blood memory on tape. An Aztec priest with the mic instead of a blade. I am not Hebrew, not Roman, not slave. Not from Atlantis, not from caves. I'm from the land where the sun behaves, where serpents dance and the cosmos waves. They dressed our truth in European masks, but we speak in pyramids, geometry that lasts. The scholars study what we whispered in dreams. We build philosophy from rivers and beams. Call me rebel, call me savage, call me heathen, but I resurrect civilization still breathing. I'm the Tleitawani of broken youth, preaching that decolonization is truth. This is Aslan reborn, no Bible, no sword. Just words sharper than obsidian cord. Every rhyme a ritual, every verse a prayer to awaken the millions who forgot we're still there. Yo soy la voz del maíz, el eco de los abuelos aún por venir. No soy ilegal, soy mil naciones en mí. Soy mixes zapoteco, a morir. I'm every tribe they try to divide, of every tongue and they try to hide. The blood remembers even when we forget. We are the sun that refuses to set. No borders, no names, no shame. We are the fire before the flame. The original people, the first, the last. The future dressed in the echoes of the past.
Ical, hijo, abre los ojos. Cuerpo se queda con nosotros, pero tu espíritu debe seguir. Busca la luz, aléjate de las sombras, deja que nuestro dolor sea tu fuerza. Desde aquí iluminamos tu camino. Lucha como nosotros antes de esta pena grande. Yo soy tú eres yo. La muerte que hoy nos separa, mañana volverá a unirnos. Eres libre, hijo.